Ladies, gentlemen, and non-binary pals, please give a warm welcome to our guests and friends on today's wonderful episode of Creative Recharge. Today's guests are M.M. Ward.
Hello, lovelies.
Laura Nettles. Dal Runo.
Hi.
Nia, the vixen of fiction.
Yay.
Colin Clark.
Good evening.
Charlie Dorset. Amy Long. Chandra Arthur and Carrie Hardisky. Yay! And let me get my mouse to do the things to pause the music, since I have to do that live. Woo! We made it! Oh my god! Welcome to the circus! Oh, this is so exciting, y'all. I'm so excited. By the way, while we're here, anybody who would like to let us know how the weather is doing where you are, I, of course, am always very fascinated. It's approximately 83 degrees in my neck of the woods and 61% humidity in my room.
I'm giving you the look, Lori. It is 60 degrees here. The wind is kicking up into the 40s, 40 miles per hour, because starting tonight, we are under a winter storm watch, and by Tuesday, we might have our first snow.
Oh my goodness.
You can have it.
I'm sending it to you, Carrie. I'm sending you all the snow.
No, I don't want it. I don't want it.
Send it to the south. Send it to Argentina. I don't care. It's spring. I don't care. Send it my way.
I'll take it.
I don't want it.
I haven't seen snow in like 6 years, so.
Well, up in my neck of the woods of Canada, it's 72 and it stopped raining.
Ooh,
Happy
nice.
Thanksgiving, Canada!
Happy Thanksgiving.
It's getting warmer and warmer in Argentina, and I don't like it. And I want to migrate north for the winter, but I can't. So crap, I'm stuck here.
I will trade with you.
Yes, please give me all that snow.
It's
don't-
it's quite humid and warm still.
I don't get snow, I get ice, but
Yeah.
you know.
Doesn't matter. I'll take it.
Yes. It is
I'd like
the
to have
weather.
snow. Never had snow.
Eva's got 61 and breezy. Oh, what I wouldn't do for a breeze. And she's dealing with 70 and actually dry. That is fantastic. Megan's got 66 degrees and cold. I mean, maybe by Megan's standards.
Sorry for the shriek, Dobby.
Let's
just
say it's
randomly
66 here and it's
All
lovely.
hail the feline overlord.
Yes.
Keeps digging holes in my armrest. I'm not happy about it though.
So, weather aside, would anybody like to do an introduction? Remember, they are totally optional because everybody's links, hopefully, are down below and working. Hopefully, I don't know. But in theory, all of these amazing people, and they are truly amazing. Like, look, my fingers are cold and clammy because I am so nervous today because I am surrounded by so many talented people. And they are like expecting me to know what I'm doing. And it's like, no. So.
You always know what you're doing.
Yeah, I was a teacher once. I'm a good faking it. I can run a room. I was top of my class in classroom management, and that's all we're getting here today. So, anyhow, would anyone like to do an introduction? Totally optional. Charlie? I saw a hand.
Yes.
And as a
Charlie
teacher,
has an amazing
we
book on
respect
Bella.
the hand.
Yes. Hi, my name is Charlie. I do way too many things, and I currently have a new fantasy book up on Kindle Vella. It is called The Shadow Phoenix Saga. It'll be over 1 million words when it's done. It's going to be like, it's kind of my angry screed about everything that's wrong with the fantasy genre, but in story form. So
Save that for the second hour.
So I would say, like, when Glory was like, hey, do you have opinions about writing sci-fi and fantasy? I was like, let me send you some of the work I'm doing right now. So, oh yes, all of them. So yay. I also stream soon to be 3 times a week over on Twitch, my regular Wednesday and Friday at 4 p.m. Eastern. I'm going to start streaming the podcast recording, but I don't know when's a good time because everybody streams it all the time and I don't know where to put it, but it will be over there.
Very nice.
As soon as I can figure it out. But
Yay.
So
Would
happy to be here.
anyone like to tap Charlie out?
I'll tap him out.
Sure.
Yeah, well, I tried and then it was like, no. There we go.
Hi, I'm Mama Maggie Ward. I am a multi-genre author with books on Amazon Kindle, Kindle Vella, and on Inkit. I have just finished my Hold My Coffee 2021 goal of 10 books in 12 months. And I'm ready for a very nice, quiet Preptober and Nano.
You're muted, Glory.
Sorry. Was there anyone else who wanted to do an intro?
Colin,
Me and Colin.
Yeah, and I'll do it too.
Sandra.
Oh,
Sandra,
okay.
Carrie, and Amy.
Yep.
And Laura with her carnivorous plant lady.
With my auditory dyslexia, we're going with Chandra because that's what I heard first. So,
Hi everyone, my name is Chandra. I am good at procrastinating and over planning. I am also a fantasy, sci-fi, and historical fiction writer. I stream on Tuesday nights from 8 to 10 p.m. and I release new videos every Wednesday and Friday.
very nice.
I'll go. And then Colin also wants to go.
Okay. Thank you all for helping me. I need it.
Hi, I am Nia, the Vixen of Fiction here on YouTube. I'm also on Twitch. I stream about every other Wednesday and Saturday over on Twitch. Usually, sometimes we'll do it here on YouTube. I am currently working on a comic book and a novella and a novel. And if you join my Ko-fi starting in December, you will get snippets of the comic over there. So you can follow me on all the places.
Excellent. All right. And then Colin?
Good evening. Yes, I'm Colin Clark. I'm currently working on a middle grade dark fantasy, an urban paranormal fantasy in episodic form. And on my AuthorTube channel, I'm doing a series at the moment on writing steampunk because my novel that's on the back burner is steampunk. So that's it from me.
Yay. All right. Let me. For a minute, I totally blinked on Carrie. There we go.
Hi, I'm Carrie. I am a mom and a fantasy writer. I have my nonfiction project, Misadventures of a Mom Author, up on Vella. It is also on my Ko-fi if you choose not to support Amazon, which I totally understand. The only difference is on Ko-fi, you'll get it like almost as soon as I type it up. Because I'm handwriting it in a journal and then I'm posting it almost immediately. So as opposed to waiting months and months down the line, you get it right away. So yeah.
Thank you. Amy?
Hello, I'm Amy. I'm Shiny Knight on Twitch, and I do 3 streams a week: Thursday, Friday, Saturday. I game playing Mass Effect Andromeda at the moment, and I also run writing sprints. And I'm currently working on my Cyberpunk series.
Excellent. Doll?
Hello there, humans. I am Dal Cecil Bruno. I'm a partially blind writer. For introspective readers, I mostly focus on sci-fi with a strong paranormal element, but I also write short stories in other genres. All of my writing features blind and visually impaired characters. And if you are curious about that sci-fi book that has been in the works forever, I have featured the first 2 chapters. It's a draft, so it's not ready, but you can see the draft of the first 2 chapters on my Patreon page if you want to support that. I don't know how to use Ko-fi. I'm so sorry. If someone teaches me how to do Ko-fi, then I can put the 2 chapters there on Ko-fi as well. But as for the moment, it's only on Patreon. Sorry. And yeah, my YouTube channel is... It will come back soon, but I will not stream. It will be just pre-recorded videos. Streams are overwhelming, but because it's Glory and Tom, I am here because they're my friends. So, yeah.
Aww, thank you, sweetie. All right. And then I guess it is only fair to put myself in the hot seat. Hi, I'm Glory, and if you don't already know, you're on our stream, Glory Writes the Blues. We have a wonderful panel of folks today to talk about science fiction and fantasy genre writing. In general, the show Creative Recharge, where we explore different forms of media, movies, TV, radio, books, you name it. And we explore writing and what that means to writers, where we can get inspiration from consuming media, as well as analysis of it. Because I feel that as a storyteller, as a lifetime storyteller, my mother started training me to tell stories when I was a toddler, that storytelling is not only in our blood, it can really help others. And at least it's one of my goals that we help the world be better, because boy, does it suck sometimes. So on that
And now it's Laura's turn. Don't forget Laura.
Oh, Laura, you wanted to
No,
go?
Laura.
Sure.
Okay, that was
Make her tell us about the carnivorous plant lady.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
So my name is Laura Nettles. My channel name is Laura Nettles, and I write mostly horror and sci-fi. But I think horror is kind of like a subset of fantasy with the monstrosities in my stories. So I have a YA sci-fi permanently shelved. I have an adult sci-fi on the back burner, and I have a middle grade horror I am currently drafting, and an adult horror collection that is being beta read right now. So that's the gambit of what I've been writing. And yeah, my day job is lighting special effects for movies. So I see a lot of fantasy-ish movies and horror movies before they come out. So that's really fun. But that's me.
excellent. Thank you, Laura. So today we're going to talk about science fiction and fantasy writing. There is a lovely list of recommendations down below. It is not meant to be definitive, because how could it ever be? As media we keep making more. So that is essentially the idea for today's show and the show series for October and November. We do it live. It's also available for people to rewatch anytime you want. We leave it up as an archive to you could refresh. I've heard people like to watch while they get ready in the morning, or while they wind down at night, or just to like kind of have us chatting in the background while they write themselves as if they were at a coffee shop. So we hope that you're having a good time and that you get something out of this stream, be it inspiration or ideas or just getting those juices flowing. And if you do, please consider liking, subscribing even. And if you know somebody that you also would love to watch this, maybe share it. Just throwing that out there. It's something to think about. And without further ado, let us start the first hour. Here we are. The first hour, where we talk about what we like about these genres and our hot takes. And if anybody would like to start with your hot takes, so here's how it goes. You just kind of jump in, and everybody gets their say. You know, you like if somebody's talking, you wait, and then you jump in or whatever. Like everybody's really sweet and nice. It's cool.
I volunteer, Charlie.
I'm not going to wrap anybody's knuckles.
I second.
But
Yes.
you know, we're
the
a
winner.
group that respects everybody's right to their opinions, even if they are not popular opinions. As long as you respect everyone else's rights to their opinions as well. So that's the deal. And beyond that, I'm pretty much just going to sit back on this show because so many opinions. I don't need to I had no idea this show was going to be so popular, y'all, just for the record. I had no clue. I was like,
I don't stream Glory, but you say sci-fi and it's like, me? What?
Yeah.
I mean, obviously I love it because I write fantasy. Right now, I've got a story on Bella. I've uploaded the second episode of it, and it is pure fantasy, and it is super fun. So, I mean, I'm obviously no one to talk about, that genre. No, I'm not othering this genre or set of genres because, like Tom and I kept talking about, is all the genres fantasy when you really boil it down? Because romance really is a bit of fantasy, right?
It is, right?
Right? I mean, like, that's not real life.
It never works like that.
I mean, there. I have a hot take. I'm gonna kick this off.
Yeah, just watch. I'm gonna mute myself.
Yeah. Regarding if something is a fantasy or if is everything fantasy, I'm like that's up to the writer. If it depends on how realistic you want your story to be, because maybe when it comes to sci-fi, maybe it's not real now. But what about in a few years when it suddenly your sci-fi becomes contemporary because it just happened or close enough, and you're like, okay, so it's all of a sudden my novel is a contemporary, not a sci-fi anymore. But that depends on the level of realism that you want to implement in your stories, and that's where I lean in the most. Or I try to. If something is not accurate, I am like, oh, let me go and fix it somehow.
And
So
Cyberpunk's its own other thing because it's very allegorical.
Yeah.
And I was thinking on that with the can romance be fantasy? Does anybody remember the movie? There's something about Mary, I think it was, where just guys would just look at her and they would just be falling in love with her, and it was a rom-com, though.
Yeah,
but that's not realistic. But also, so in some ways that was kind of fantastical. That just every guy was just like falling for this girl.
Well,
See,
I think a big difference between science fiction and fantasy, and right now we're getting that overlap of what's called sci-fan, which is fantasy and science fiction overlap. But the difference is in science fiction, can it be quantitatively measured? Whereas in fantasy, there's something mystical, there's something unprovable, there's a leap of faith that readers have to take. Anne McCaffrey, she's one of my favorite artists, and everyone always says, oh, she's fantasy because she had dragons. No, she was not. And she gave many interviews about how my work is not fantasy. My dragons were genetically engineered to be basically airplanes and weapons. And everything she did had a rational, scientific explanation. Even if we don't have the technology, she provided the theory for the technology. Whereas like in the Earthsea series with the magical systems, they were able to go, this incantation or this object or this thing causes this effect. Magic, material, you cast spells and stuff like that. So there's this dividing line that now we're really, really getting the overlap in, especially with an unpopular opinion. Star Wars.
I was going to say Star Wars.
It is not fantasy. It is not science fiction. It is sci-fi fusion.
Yeah,
it's actually a Western.
It's a perfect fusion. We can't confuse subgenre with the genre. Like if it's romance, it can have elements of fantasy or elements of sci-fi in it, but that doesn't make it sci-fi or fantasy.
This is where I get really old school about this. Because all of the older definitions are very clear. A science fiction story is something that a scientific idea, principle, or technology is integral to the plot. And fantasy was defined as something where magic or something outside of the ordinary that is generally unexplainable is integral to the plot. If it's just set in the future, that's not sci-fi. That's futuristic fiction to me.
Thank you.
Yes.
There's a big difference between the two. If it's not integral, if it doesn't actually matter, this is why I get really frustrated at people going after like Lord of the Rings with the One Ring. The One Ring is not a MacGuffin. The One Ring is a character in the story that is whispering to, tempting, and haunting the various characters throughout the tale. In a lot of knockoffs of Lord of the Rings, the One Thing, the Sword of Shannara, for example, is a MacGuffin. That could be the Maltese Falcon. Because that's actually a future dystopian story that is more sci-fi than fantasy, but most people don't read long enough in the series to get there.
Well, a lot of people would say that's the same difference that you get in steampunk, which is steampunk. I mean, pure steampunk, if there is such a thing, that needs the machinery for it to be effective. Without the machinery, the story won't work. So therefore, that's technical. I like gaslight fantasy, which is fantasy as far as I'm concerned, with cogs glued on, as my friend Martin often tells me. It's just fantasy with cogs glued on.
Yep.
Not quite.
So just to get kind of technical on this as well, steampunk could also be considered alternate history.
Yeah, very true.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
If particularly if it's steampunk that's taking place in the past, then absolutely.
Mm-hmm. So
Well,
yeah, I think
steampunk-
really it's your perspective, isn't it? How
Yes.
do you view what you're reading? Because that's the most important thing. I mean, I did notice Eva in the comments there, semantics, she's only stirring the pot. But it is, as a reader, I read to be entertained, and if it entertains me, I don't mind what the label we use.
And it's a problem. All genre is problematic because they are first and foremost marketing tools, not literary tools. And while many of us who write are looking at them from a literary lens and looking at them like this is what the genre is, their real purpose is to create a marketing cohort of people that you can then send the book out to.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where things I feel are getting really interesting with both sci-fi, fantasy, and all of the children genres that are out
And
there.
all the romance elements that overtake the sci-fi, but I'm going to save that for the second hour because I have a rant reserved for that.
I also wanted to jump back to the point about the reader determining the genre, not the author, because I've definitely read books where it was classed as being like a YA something or other, and I was like, no, that's not how I took it at all. So I think that we do our best to categorize our work in the way that we see it, but ultimately it's in the eye of the beholder.
I think it definitely needs to be key elements though to be able to tick the basic boxes for a genre. Like for cyberpunk, you have to have some kind of oppressive sort of situation for the punk because that's the characters rebelling against this oppression. There's got to be something unfair in society, and then classed with mixed with the tech side of things as well. They're like the two main core parts of the genre. So
But
I think there's definitely
sometimes the author, or if they're traditionally published, the publisher will flat out lie on the back blurb or what they do it under, just so they can try and get to a bigger audience.
Yeah, I think it helps with shelving in the bookstores. If you're traditionally published, where they're going to put that book. If you don't have it where it's going to be marketable, then that could be a problem. But then when people read the book and it's not what they expect, then you're going to get complaints.
I'm having that problem with my thing because like I said, it's sci-fi. Sure, it is sci-fi, but it has a very strong, like super strong paranormal element in the shape of lucid dreams and astral projection and clairvoyance and all these psychic abilities, whatever. So people are like, is that sci-fi? Yeah, it is. But is it? And then I start questioning myself. And then it's like, where do I put that book on the shelves? Does it even have a place on the shelf? And then I start going crazy and asking all AuthorTube and dragging everyone crazy. And it's like, at the end of the day, I'm just, you know what? I'm not going to complicate my life. It's sci-fi. It's about genetic engineering. This is why people are that way. This is why they have all the abilities that they have. They were genetically made to be that way. And they live in space because they were meant to be that way, and it's just, okay, I have some tech elements in there, but the whole focus of the story is not that. So it's been a struggle just to define my thing, even though it's easy to just put it as sci-fi. And then I just don't complicate my life anymore and just go with the flow.
Well, Anne McCaffrey's Rowan series, which is all about psychics and mind powers and stuff, is very clearly a sci-fi story. In that, it's a very
The Tower in the Hive.
Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
The Tower in the Hive series. And then you have the Brain Ship series, which is very, very sci-fi.
To me,
I think what happens with science fiction and fantasy writers, and it's because there are so many subgenres of these two huge categories, all of us have the boxes that I have to check for my Sword and Planet series are not the same as Charlie's fantasy, his space, his pirates, and not the same as Laura's plants, and not the same as Colin's steampunk war era book. So it's, or Dahl's investigator in space. We all write science fiction, but we all have very specific sets of boxes that we have to check for each of our fields that's not in anyone else's field.
Right.
The way I look at the big dividing line, at least as far as the marketing goes, between sci-fi, science fiction, and fantasy now, is science fiction books tend to make you think. Yes. They make you question things, whereas fantasy books make you feel and react to things.
Good.
So, the more, depending on where you are on that line, that can also kind of help you feel out which market is best for the story. Because, the more I'm challenged by an idea, like we're watching through the Foundation series right now, and I remember thinking about all of the predictive possibilities of mathematics when I read the books, and the show is making me think about all of that while at the same time giving me feelings that Isaac Asimov was incapable as a human being of ever putting in text. And, I feel like sliding more into that middle ground, but it's still the same story. It's just how much am I feeling? How much am I thinking about the ideas that are there?
So I also have a hot take that runs completely counter to what I previously said, but magic is just science that we don't understand yet.
I mean, one person's magic is another person's science. Yeah, I've heard that a lot.
What is the Force? Is the Force something that they just don't understand what it is, but they can utilize it?
So in my Gates of Ascension adult sci-fi novel 2-book thingy I've been working on, I have things like sentient spaceships that are part biological. And so, that's really cool and it's fun to explore, but I'm not exploring the morality of, is it okay and do they have souls? I'm going more the fantasy and less the sci-fi route. I'm doing the more, it's cool to explore and have fun and not the implications of what's going on. So I'm definitely going more soft sci-fi and not the moral implications.
I'm totally going on the ethics of genetic engineered humans in space and the broken families and taking your children to space and treating them like basically child labor. Oh, I'm going heavy. It's heavy. It's still soft sci-fi, but the topics are kind of that's why I don't market it for kids, even though people are like, how is this not YA? And I'm like, no, please, no, it's not.
Well, science fiction is one of the few places that allows for idea as hero stories. And it's something that, especially on AuthorTube, is not talked about a lot. We always talk about our protagonists and our characters and whatnot. A lot of science fiction, especially from the Golden and Silver Ages, were idea as hero stories. The characters were secondary to whatever the topic was that was being discussed. They existed solely to probe the the ethical question, the scientific question, or whatever that science technology thing was. That was what the story was about. And that's something that's kind of missing from a lot of modern sci-fi, is because everything is wanting to be a Netflix series. Everything is wanting to have its 5 seasons in a movie. Everything is moving more towards that action adventure stuff, and I feel like science fiction has lost a lot of its flavor because of that.
Yes, thank you.
Has. Yes,
thank you. It feels so great not to be alone in this. I am blind, so I don't watch TV. I don't care for movies.
Fantasy has too, though. Fantasy's lost a lot of flavor, and I
mainstream.
The problem with fantasy is a lot of fantasy is now leaking into, or is now overlapped with paranormal. you get all of the paranormal fiction, and they're like, oh, this is fantasy, angels and demons and monsters and stuff. And I'm like, but swords and sorcery and the Great Quest and Arthurian legends and it's so
Like all
it
jumbled
gets
up
very
in one
interesting.
thing.
I know that Colin's Gas Lamp has kind of the one he's working on has kind of this fantasy mystical object hidden underneath a bridge portal thing.
Yeah, it's now actually a heart.
So
I'm doing the next part of the series tomorrow, so it's actually, it may even be a mechanical heart, but it's to go into a very large man-made machine now. But I was actually going to disagree with paranormal not being fantasy. I think it's part and parcel of fantasy. I really do.
Yeah.
Yes, we can be purists in whichever we like, but I agree with what Amy said. There are certain tropes that are expected in certain genres. So if you ignore those tropes while you're writing paranormal or putting paranormal in your fantasy, but yeah, you've got to have the tropes there so the readers.
What I'm understanding from you who was talking was it Nia?
Colin?
No, before Colin was it
Maggie.
Maggie. Okay. Yeah, Maggie. What I understand from what Maggie was saying is that from what I have heard of clips on YouTube and Netflix and stuff, it's like everything is like jumbling up together because the series have to have everything in them. Demons and angels and witches and sorcerers and MacGuffins and science and this and that and everything together in one big epic series where everything happens at once. And I am getting that sense as well. And just by, for example, just by watching She-Ra alone, I was like, yeah, I see how everything is like meshing together, and it's just like, no.
And more
than, definitely all the new
more
stuff.
than just meshing together, they're trying. Everything is starting to look the same. Even if you read the book, and the book was different. By the time it gets to Netflix, it's starting to look a little bit like everything else because they've got a formula that works. So they'll make changes.
I am so glad.
There's intention or not.
I am so glad that the Avatar creators just dumped
the writing now writing to that. They know that, okay, they're going to change my story to fit this formula for Netflix or Hulu or Amazon or whatever. So I'm just going to go ahead and write it that way anyway. But yeah, it's starting to have a very similar look. There are a few that stand out to me. Like I love Motherland. I love Motherland. Yeah. I'm just like, I like so many things that they're doing in that one.
I'm very grateful to the Avatar creators, but they dumped Netflix. Like, nope, sorry, no Avatar on Netflix, bye. And I'm so grateful for that.
To answer Michael's question, the problem is the mass market. Fantasy and science fiction worked best when it was a niche market. And now that it's a mass market, it has to be watered down. You're not going to get 100 million people to sign on and watch your show if it is too niche. So it's the problem of the popularity of the genre. That's where all the flavor is going. The more people you want to read it, the less challenging it has to be. You have to be able to bring more people in. You have to rub off all the...
And because of that, because it needs to be kind of, I don't know, dumbed down or whatever for mainstream media. That's why, and it's probably very similar with steampunk as well. Cyberpunk can never be mainstream because then it won't be cyberpunk, for instance. So some genres just lose some of their core elements just by becoming watered down. It just can't happen. And that's why some niche genres just don't get out there as much.
I think that's what I miss the most about like true fantasy. Even in Lord of the Rings, it didn't have the same element of casting and magical battles that I like. The big scenes that you want to see from your fantasy books usually get cut because of that, because they are so fantastical. But it's like, that's why I liked it to begin with.
And this is where there's a statistics term that really shows what's going on here. It's the normalization of the genres. You have to find that one plot that rules them all, and you can see it. Netflix has one, Marvel has another one. Star Wars has started figuring out the one that they're using. Disney has about 6 of them that they keep on hand that they pass around to depending on what project they're doing. And then whatever they're doing, yeah, whatever happens gets normalized to that plot. So it's
Well, I think we saw this starting to happen with Stargate. Stargate went from this really cool sci-fi book into this movie, and it became this series, and then it became very dramatized, and you started losing it just became repetitive, almost political statements. And then Star Trek started doing that. And so Star Trek is now more about the political activism than it is about the science fiction.
I'm so glad I'm not watching series.
And
well, with Stargate specifically, you could see all of the changes that each series went through to start fitting in. And by the time they got to the last one, the Stargate universe, it was so dark and so not fun because they were chasing that trend where all of a sudden everything had to be dark and gritty. And I'm like, there's none of these characters that I like. I hate them all. You want me to like this protagonist? Where's my team? Like the first two Stargates, Atlantis and SG-1. I'm a little bit ranty here because I really they messed it up. But the first two series, you have, even when things get political or or get a little weird, you had the team. They had this banter, this camaraderie. Even when, the race were coming down on them, the team, there was this laughter, fun times, and then things would get hard. And then there would be like the laughter, the fun time. We're all in this together. And that was totally gone by the time they got to Stargate Universe, where it's like, we hate all these people. They're just the worst.
Yeah,
but
they lost a lot of that. But even the exploration side of things. And my mum actually went to a panel from one of the actors who was in Stargate Atlantis, and he was commenting about how Universe, they wanted to make the Stargate series and franchise hit a larger audience. They wanted to hit, because that's why they've got the horny teens in it, and they went that real drama direction and made it that kind of... Yeah, they lost the sci-fi and the adventure and the exploration as much as they had in the original shows. The first two seasons are the best. But he was talking about how they threw away this, hundreds of thousands of true fans trying to breach into a mainstream media market, which clearly didn't work because things went under. But,
the sad thing is with that one, with Universe, by the end of the second season, after it was already canceled, they started developing, let's be a team. Let's go on. Let's take care of each other. That started, but it was already canceled. I was like, if they had started like this, and they still could have had it more of the dark, gritty, but if they'd have started with that, with the formula that had worked for all these, 10, 12 years that they had been doing, the SG-1 and then Atlantis, at least they would have held on to us core. But they did away with that. It was know what your audience wants, even if you're in sci-fi and fantasy. And
which is why shows
don't mess up a good thing.
Which is why I think really if you've actually written something that you're quite proud of and it's about to get made by Netflix, just take the check and because we all do it.
Don't even bother watching it.
No, I washed my hands of it. If you want to see what I did, this is what I did, and that's what they did to it. So
take the but keep the rights.
About paranormal in. I understand now we're talking mass media. I was just on about books and writing, but
I'm with Colin.
I'm kind of nervous.
With the trends at the moment, I mean, the big hit at the moment, perhaps because it has got flavour, is Squid Game, which is magnificent. But why is it magnificent? Because it stands out from all the rest of the tripe that's on at the moment. So I thoroughly enjoyed it.
I want to say, and I linked her podcast in the comments. My friend Sarah does this audio drama called Girl in Space, and it is so good. It's only got the one season up, and I believe it's the Sci-Fi Network that's been developing the TV show for some time. So I am so scared for her that they're going to mess it up because the audio drama is so good, and it's and I said in the comment, it's got some mystical elements to it. I'm not going to spoil it, but Yeah, but when it goes to that mass audience,
Well, I think all of us here as different levels of sci-fi and fantasy writer, we are all facing that thing of here's our book, here's our world, and then we have all of these different versions of the great overlord D. And that's gonna like, okay, thank you. I'm going to take your world and I'm going to do whatever I want with it.
So the
And
other thing that I was
seeing that in the
thinking-
Marvel universe right now.
But
The
even
great
outside
overlord
of
D
that,
has decided this is what I'm doing with the Marvel universe. They did the same thing to Star Wars, and so
Well, I mean,
Mhm.
like this is why maybe that's why I'm not so affected by it, because I more than watching stuff, I read books, and my focus is a lot more on mostly foreign authors or sci-fi a la Andy Weir. Amazing. I love Andy Weir. I love what he does. And that's the kind of sci-fi that I love. And I'm happy to see that it still exists. Maybe it's not going to be on Netflix, but who cares? I don't even watch Netflix. So I focus on what I like and kind of leave out all the rest. Because otherwise I'm going to be very demotivated to even work on my own thing.
Well,
even outside of Netflix, though, if you look at HBO, who has one of the biggest show budgets,
I'm not in America.
like
I'm not. Okay, correction.
I'm
I'm blind. Correction. I'm blind. I'm not in America. I don't watch TV. I don't watch movies. I don't watch Netflix. No HBO. No Amazon Prime. No Hulu. No nothing. Nothing.
But I mean, as far as the development out of the elements for screen, the HBO has one of the biggest budgets for that. And a lot of times, even in Game of Thrones, they had to modify episodes because of the budget around special effects.
Right.
Like they were choosing between different elements just in order to convey the scale.
But that's different.
It is so important for us, though, to pay attention to what's going on in the mass media, especially for anybody who's looking for traditional publication, because traditional publication only exists now as a vehicle to launch a movie series or a TV series.
Well, that's depressing.
If they don't think your book will be picked up by one of the studios, they're probably going to pass on it. Like that they're incubators for future stories.
And this is another thing they're thinking about. This is something you need to be very aware of when you go to sell your book, is that publishing houses are now buying the first book in a series, and they're not buying that book. They're buying that world. And then they take the first one. They kick the writer to the curb, and then they get ghostwriters to rebuild that world.
I have absolutely no interest in that.
No, okay, that's scary.
I'm too protective of my stuff.
That's really scary. That's really scary and depressing, and no thank you.
I could totally see them doing that with Colin's book. I could totally see them buying his amazing world in the first book and then saying, okay, well, we're going to throw some Sherlockian and Assassin's Creed elements in it, and we're going to kick you out. I'm sorry, Colin.
Yeah, but
I don't want that to happen to you. I love your world.
Line, believe me, but I'm going to self-publish that one anyway, so that one writes.
Yeah.
I haven't started writing it yet. That's next year.
No, I'd rather turn down a Netflix contract than give up my world and my characters, because I don't want them messing with my world and my characters. I wrote them that way for a reason. That's how I want them to be seen. Yeah. So,
And this is why it's more important than ever for us to be looking at the industry and how we want to interact and interface with it, especially as genre writers, because the genre market, just go and look at whatever the new books are out from the major publishing houses, and just close your eyes and think for a second which streaming service that series is being pushed towards, because you can see it. You can do it one for one with all of the new stuff that's coming out, and that's what is corrupting the genre.
But part of the problem too with that is, even if Netflix does pick it up, if they take all of your characters and everything like that, then they run it for one season, they do something awful to it, it gets killed after one season, but they still have all your stuff.
But it still drives people to your books. And so people can pick it up and read it. That's one thing that I had to learn the hard way with that stupid Avatar: The Last Airbender movie. Was even though that abomination happened,
that
the
doesn't
original
exist.
still
Don't bring it up.
exists.
Don't even mention that doesn't exist. That
The
does
original
not exist.
still exists, and it's still dear to my heart, and I can still go back and watch it whenever I want.
Yeah.
So,
just a sidebar. How does M. Night Shyamalan still get work? Anyway.
Yeah. I think though some things can be a little bit strange. You can't completely rely on mainstream means bad though, because going back into the cyberpunk side of things, Altered Carbon was a series that Netflix picked up, and it went for 2 seasons. It was really, really good, but it got cancelled because in the second season they actually dumbed it down and made it mainstream, and that actually is what lost the views and why they cancelled it. So the fact that it was smart, there were enough people in that niche audience that were keeping it up on Netflix, but then thinking, oh, we're not hitting the numbers, let's dumb it down, make it reach a larger audience, make it mainstream, actually backfired, and it didn't actually work, which was really interesting because writing the cyberpunk side of things, I'm not expecting it to be like a huge audience because it's a niche genre. But I thought that was an interesting view on things.
Now I have a question, because I am thinking of a workaround, because I am pursuing traditional publishing for financial reasons, because, hey, I cannot afford indie. I cannot afford it, so I have to. But then I have a workaround. So this applies to genre fiction. These are like the incubators for whatever Netflix wants to do next or whatever. What if we make it like a blend with the more literary approach? It's still genre, but with a literary touch. I've seen that done before. Like this.
Not by the time Netflix get their hands on it, it won't be.
Great. But it can still sell, and it can still be traditionally published. No, I mean,
well,
it really depends on the work, because as everyone that I know that has been traditionally published over the last 30 years have all gone indie, with the exception of their tie-in work, which is what they pay their bills with. Because they just crank out.
Yeah, but what would you say about authors like Margaret Atwood or Kazuo Ishiguro, or these people who have like a more literary touch to their dystopias, for example?
But some of them are like Margaret Atwood's super established as well.
Yeah,
and had a
there will
hard
always
time
be a place for a
breaking in
prestige
initially.
title. Never forget that. There will always be a place for a prestige title. Every genre every company will always have its prestige title that they think is going to get them that Hugo, get them that Nebula, get them that Lambda literary award, which is sometimes worth actually reading. But they're always going to have their prestige title. But that's a harder path to walk, because you have to be the one that they think, oh, that's going to win the award.
Well, the other thing with the prestige authors now is these prestige authors is you're not just selling their book. They're selling their personality. They're selling you have an agent now, and you will be on a mass media show every third day of the year, and on radio and at cons and at book signings. And to be that prestige author now, it's not just, I mean, we would all love the Thoreau myth of just going and sitting in a cabin and writing all day, and that's all we do. That place does not exist anymore. And I think for fantasy and for sci-fi writers, that's the hardest goal of us all, is because none of us are going to get that myth of only a novelist, unless some big force like Disney or Netflix or HBO or something like that, or the Sci-Fi Channel even picks us up, because science fiction and fantasy have these very specific genre tropes. And unfortunately, because they are now mass marketing science fiction and fantasy, we're now moving into a system where it used to be you had very, very hard lines. Science fiction was this, 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 this. Fantasy was this, 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 this. And you had to check those boxes regardless of which subgenre you were writing in. But now we're into a place where a lot of science fiction and fantasy writers are writing what's called soft systems. And the author who shall not be named, even though in the very first book, it's like, here is the hard magic system. You can't do this and you can't do that. By the third book, all of that was gone. All of it was out the window. I can't think of the series of the. I just finished reading a sci-fi series, and the first 2 books were hard system, and by the third book, I DNF'd the third book because the science basically became magic. It was they were doing things that they did not have the technology to support. And so
I would have also DNF'd.
Was there an explanation, or was it just like, oh,
no? They just started being able to do more and more technology things. It's a series I was reading on Inkit, and that's where you, if you're in one genre or the other, and you're not in that sci-fan middle ground. The magic systems, you have to explain your magic. For every magical expert, there is a cost. For your technology system, you have to be able to, well, there's this kind of energy that does this. There's this kind of technology that does this. This is the reason this works. But when you start getting into the mass market of, well, now we have spaceships that will magically go many times faster than the speed of light. And it's like, do you know the math between just how far apart these two places are?
It's called ludicrous speed.
Because
I do think that there's an explanation of the scale of going from hard magic to soft magic systems was really helpful, and anyone who's wanting to write in the genre should definitely check that out.
But going back,
I will say, like, for my my space drama, it is more space drama. But even though it's a space drama or a space opera more than hard sci-fi, I still needed all of my science to make sense. So I literally mapped out and calculated what the speed of how far they could go, how many light years they could go at this speed, and how long it would take, because my mind would not let me just say, oh, they just got there in that much time. I'm like, I cannot.
I'm the same. I have to research my physics.
Right.
I think it would be possible to do something where, like, they were trying to create something else and they accidentally made something that they don't know why exactly it works, but it works. But you still have an explanation for that.
Yes, exactly.
And going back to what Glory said at the very beginning, like, what do we love about the genre? You can hear what we love about this. Like, this for me is like the entire project that I'm doing right now. The entire epic fantasy series that I'm writing right now is just a love letter to what I miss in the genre that's been taken out. Like, I miss meeting new things and seeing things that I've never seen in fiction that way before. And like, I remember reading fantasy books and just constantly being in a state of awe of like, ooh, what's that? What's that do? And like, really like just falling in love with it and wanting to do that again. And I think that's our path forward as indie writers, especially because we don't have those gatekeepers telling us, oh no, that's not going to fit into the market.
Yeah.
I hope that the person, I'm not going to name the name, I'm not going to name the book, and I hope the writer never finds out, because I'm not saying this to be mean. This is not anything directed personally at the author or the book. But recently I read a sci-fi. It's marketed as a sci-fi, and I was very excited to read it. It's an author that I like to read the other books that the author has written, blah, 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 blah. I was very excited. And then I read the book and I was like, no. And it turns out it's one of the books that the author published more traditional, like the more traditional publishing style. And now I'm left wondering, how much did the publisher ruin the potential of this story? because I don't believe the author would have done it this way. I refuse to think. My heart is broken, and I refuse to think that it was the author's fault. I just cannot do this. And yeah, I have been so conflicted that I don't talk about this book. I will not talk about it. I will never say what I'm talking about exactly. Those who know me well and follow what I post might have an idea, but I'm not going to confirm nor deny. And it was one of those books that I was going in for the sci-fi and ended up with a love story romance that took over the sci-fi. And my heart is just broken. This is not what I love about science fiction is, yeah, it's the geeky stuff. I am on the side of science, and I'm going to turn my Entrapta voice on because I just cannot handle it when they don't give me enough scientific experimentations for my brain to start working and pondering with. And you can see now that I'm starting to use difficult words because that's what I love about science fiction. And I'm going to stop right there. Yeah, I mean, that's what I love. I love opening a book that makes me think about space and exploration and all the possibilities. What could we find? It's not about green dwarfs from Mars anymore. It's a lot of things that could happen in space and or near future technology or time travel that actually has time paradoxes in it. Yes. Oops. Sorry. Oops.
On the other side of that, with fantasy, I think we see as well that specifically George R.R. Martin, even as big as he is with what he did with fantasy, the endings can still be hijacked and destroyed.
Yes.
But there is, on the other side of that, there is redemption, because he said he will be continuing to write. So there is hope. But also, we still don't get to see it on screen.
And to answer the one question that keeps coming up, like, how do we get through this? How do we defeat it? As a group, as a cohort, you find the other fantasy writers that are writing fantasy out of the same passion that you are. You find the other sci-fi authors that are operating out of the same passion that you are, and share your audiences. Promote each other's books. That's how you get out. That's how we win.
And with that, I think it's probably about time that we take a short bio break. Give everybody a chance to maybe get a snack.
I just want to make a quick moment because I see that she's still on the stream. Hey, Morgan Hazelwood, I would like to have a chat with you, but I know that I have to request it for you. Don't do DMs and stuff, but I don't want to talk about this publicly. I would just like to have a chat with you. If it's possible in the near future, I would like to message you. That's it. Now, Glory.
Okay, now, so for our bio break, because I've never had this many people on while trying to do the timer, we may or may not be able to use the timer. I'm going to take myself out and see if I can get the timer to then share screen. Who knows what's going to happen?
Glory, I'm going to drop, and I'll be back later, so that may help.
Well, that'll work then. Bye-bye. See you a little bit. And also, when we come back, we will be answering more of your questions. If you have questions, please be sure to put them in the chat during the break. And we will also be talking about, the shortcomings and problematic issues of fantasy and science fiction that we haven't already touched on, or maybe even if we have already touched on it, we will touch on it again. I have no idea what's going to happen. I just have on my, circus leader hat. That's all. So with that, please consider getting a snack, maybe taking a little walk around. Water. Have you thought about water today? Maybe now's a wonderful time to think about fluids. It does a brain good. Throwing that out.
Hydrate or dihydrate.
And we will see y'all back here in a few minutes. Beep, 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 boo. Thank you. Tom brought fresh popcorn
Very nice.
with brown butter. It smells amazing.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. So, how did everybody's break go?
Wonderful.
Excellent. That's the important thing.
Fresh cup of tea.
Yes.
Oh, very,
Very
good. Very
good.
important.
I'm still on no camp because I am stuffing my face right now. So
Yes, understandable. Obviously, I have no issues. I will just eat. Though I'll let y'all hear me eat. For
I
ASMR.
mute and unmute. I'm not eating, but I have like a glass of ice water, so I have ice cubes on it, and I chew the ice cubes. So, and no, I'm not gonna bring that noise to you here.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, the theory that I'm really an alien chewing on human bones is gonna become true.
Lovely.
Right? You know, we take it what it is. I'm glad everybody had a good break.
Maggie, you're muted.
Oh, Maggie's still muted, sweetheart.
Maggie, you're still muted.
Maggie, you're muted.
There you go.
I finished my coffee and I've switched to water, so you now have video proof that I actually do not simply drink coffee all the time.
I mean,
Dispelling all
you
the
can add caffeine to water. I'm just saying.
You can add caffeine to shampoo, but it makes your hair get thin.
It could be vodka. You never know.
We'll find out.
My friend Sarah that I referenced, she drinks her water when she does her live streams out of a mason jar cup, and she has a label on it that says "not moonshine."
Yeah, so everyone would be like, "Well, of course it's moonshine." Then I mean,
yeah. If you say it's not, then it obviously is.
Obviously,
yeah. When I drink out of a mason cup, it's usually a pretty coffee, or not coffee, but a pretty cocoa or something like that, or tea. So you can tell it's not moonshine. Does not mean that there's no moonshine in it. It's a whole other thing.
That is the whole thing, isn't it?
Yeah. Do you know that whiskey over ice looks a lot like iced tea?
It does.
It also looks like apple juice to me.
Stop giving away my secrets.
I mean, I have no idea what you're
need a
talking
Long
about. I have
Island
no
iced
idea.
tea.
I was mindlessly nodding for some other reason.
Other reasons have nothing to do with that. Yes, exactly. So for the second hour, where we acknowledge shortcomings and problematic issues, as well as answering questions, I just went ahead, since I'm hosting, I'm going to say my bit, and then I will back off.
Can I go next?
Yes. Here's my podium. Not that there's the only shortcomings in my opinion about these genres, but one of my big issues is the inherent ableism that writers bring to these genres. Magic, fantasy, science fiction is not necessarily an ableist genre. It's that people bring that thinking of like somehow magic will fix. People will grow back legs and things. That is not what people who actually have some problem interacting with the world want to change. They want to change the world. They don't want to change themselves.
Right.
And that science will somehow magically fix everyone's ailments, that there's no sick people in space versus, excuse me, in my opinion, space seems to be like the perfect place for sick people to be. I loved that about Heinlein and The Moon is a Harsh Mistress, where our main character,
wonders.
Yeah, then our main character has, I think it's like, 1.5 legs? I can't remember. And he's a war veteran. He has other injuries. So he lives on a space station with very low G so that he doesn't feel all the effects of gravity. Also, because he's in a low G space station, other people don't notice that he has a little gait or a different kind of gait because he has a prosthetic. People don't normally notice it because everybody's walking funny there. And so he feels more comfortable. I love that Heinlein addressed that in that way rather than science fixes all. We'll just regrow you a leg.
And then there's the Illuminate files where a spaceship is a giant petri dish and everybody turns into mindless homicidal zombie creature like people
Isn't that normal and experimented? No, I'm just kidding. But that is like one of my, as well as like where like especially science fiction, well, and fantasy have these strict gender norms that everybody seems to subscribe to, and I find that weird. I find that really strange versus I thought out in space and in other worlds we could redefine ourselves how we want. Why is it the gender norms are even stricter? That's weird.
Some of us do, but we haven't got our stuff out there yet.
Yes.
Hi, yes.
And my sci-fi is matriarchal.
We have yeah, I have my fantasy is somewhat matriarchal. It's very interesting. Different.
I mean, this once again, this is why I don't market my thing for the younger audiences, because I am basically talking to the older crowd, because my sci-fi has a lot of on the nose commentary on ableism and religious belief being ableist and science being ableist, and everybody just wanted to get rid of us. And yeah, I don't think that's for kids to understand to that level, and that's why I'm not marketing it that way. But ableism is one of my biggest complaints. Ableism is why I don't read most fantasy. Like, I just cannot handle it. I mean, sci-fi has its own ableist bullshit, but I encounter it less than every freaking monster in fantasy is blind, and they all have to die for whatever reason. So fantasy has become this genre that I openly and unapologetically avoid. Like, oh, it's fantasy. Oh, okay, no, I'm not reading that. Sorry, I'm not the audience for you. So sorry. Good luck.
where I thought it would be interesting that to make one of my protagonists is actually almost fully blind, partially blind, and sci-fi. So augmentations, but do the augmentations always work? You know, I'm like, why is that not an interesting story? Why does everybody have to be visually able?
I started my world building for both of my series that I've got going on right now with the basic rule: nothing can be heteronormative, and heterotemporality cannot exist in this world.
Yay, Ursula K. Le Guin!
Yes, those were my first two starting rules and have been my guiding light through the world building of this setting.
Well, I have in my Ghost with Cats, Ghost with Ink, Ghost with Hope series, I have this really kind of twisted society among the Elo where the Elo are going extinct. And they're to this place where there is like one female birth out of every 400 births. So at the time when the book is happening, there's 1 million Elo left, and only 12,000 are females. So the females basically they've all turned into Black Widows. They because they are so valuable simply for the fact that they can give birth, they do whatever they want. They take whatever they want. They kill whomever they want. And there's a lottery system where it's not a good kind of lottery. It's the females are like 3 times a year. For 3 years, they're only required to have 1 child every 3rd year, simply to extend their species. But 3 times a year until they get pregnant, they can just kill whomever they wish. And they'll go in the lottery, and it's so bad that the males have basically moved off world just to keep from getting killed. And it's become a sport. It's become a sport among the females in this society, because they have clones. They have a cloned work and war force, but it takes 12 years to grow a clone, and they're not able to reproduce, and they're not as intelligent as a normal born being, and they have other issues. So they do have some level of cloning, but it's not enough to save their species. And so when my human female lead character goes into this world, she's a person who was raised with very normal Christian value life. She was raised as a Messianic Jew. So she has this very strong value all life mentality. And first of all, she's horrified by the fact that 10,000 of their 12,000 remaining females kill their own male offspring. If they don't have a daughter, they just kill their own baby right there at birth. And then there's also a thing of where Annie sees the clones as being living beings, and no one else on Elo. They're biomachines because they're cloned beings and they can't reproduce. Therefore, they're not considered living beings. And so it's, you can have science fiction, but you can also have like anthropologically altered science fiction. Like the whole basis for this was extinction studies, and a society can survive a mass loss of males because of the way mammals procreate. But a mass loss of females is much more difficult to overcome.
It's much more traumatic because the female can only have 1 to 2 children. Also, something I studied from my matriarchal fantasy, because a female can only bear so many children, unless you magically or technologically alter that. It is more dramatic to lose females in your population.
Mhm. Laura, did you have something to say?
So this isn't on ableism, but it's like another topic.
Yeah.
So I have a confession. This is author confessions now. I have a permanently shelved YA sci-fi because it has cultural appropriation in it. And I was wondering, how do you guys world build worlds that incorporate Earth as part of like the history and the sci-fi without cultural appropriation?
So, okay, Laura. Okay. To anyone who has read any of my work, plot twist, I'm not Icelandic. There you go.
Because in mine, it has colonization in it. So there is a planet, and they agree to allow a colony to be on there with the main group. But part of the colonizers was like, no, we need to keep our cultural history. Like, we need to keep our heritage. So they go under the water into a giant snail shell and live out underwater to be isolationist.
So what is so wrong about it?
It's a Samoan.
Okay, that was
Samoan.
my question. What is the culture being appropriated? Is it the mainstream culture, or it is an actually marginalized culture? And it is a marginalized culture. So,
yes, and I can't find a sensitivity reader, so it is permanently shelved.
Okay.
Like, I was even reading their newspapers. I've read their medicinal books. I've done a ton of research, but I am not Samoan. And therefore, I feel like if it does get published, it would take a place away from a possible Samoan person who wrote a story. So it's like so complicated.
Why
a couple
would it,
of things that
why
you
would
can
it
still,
take
there's
a
a couple
place?
of things you can still do.
Sorry, but as the marginalized person here, hi, Argentina, si nadie me cree, hablo español también. Okay, I'm a minority. There you go. I don't subscribe to this narrative that I will take away the play. I'm not Icelandic. I'm not fully Finnish. I'm not Russian. Why is this a problem? Okay, for Laura, you haven't found the sensitivity readers. There I give you the nod because I agree. There, that's a problem. But the whole thing that I will take the place away from, no.
Because traditional publishers have check boxes.
Yeah, that's a problem with traditional publication.
Yeah, here's one of the suggestions I would have for you. If you're not afraid of a part of the story being put out in the public, give it to a group in that community. They're not necessarily sensitivity readers, but you could give it to them and say, no one's writing this story. I would like to write this story. It uses this. You guys can just read it and if you could give me some feedback. And if it's harmful or
I love that idea.
Inappropriate, let me know, and it will continue to be shelved until I can get a proper sensitivity reader. But if you're not afraid of giving it, and of course you ask them, please don't disclose it to anybody. I'm giving it to you as a group in this particular community so that
It's
I'm
just hard to
sure I'm not-
find. Like, I know a couple Samoans, but like
and
they're not big readers.
It's
Yeah,
understandable why
I do
you're.
too. I'm like, but I don't know if they'd be able to help you.
It's understandable why you're struggling, Laura. Specifically because various countries that are predominantly Samoan in the South Pacific do not have affordable, reliable internet access. This is actually a major issue in library lands. Like, this is a serious problem, even like among American territories where libraries are out in the South Pacific, where it's difficult to even provide affordable internet to libraries on these islands. So I can see where you're having a very understandable struggle, even finding sensitivity readers, let alone people who understand like what is sensitivity readers and what are you as a writer looking for out of readers.
I was even in communication with the Polynesian Cultural Center in Hawaii, asking them questions. And then I think I just got lost in the shuffle because they didn't respond after the first one.
But here's the thing, Laura, you've been doing a lot of homework.
Yes.
The problem for me, how I see it, the problem comes when you don't do the homework and you screw big time. So that's where
you still get authors who get canceled, like the Poppy War.
I don't give a about author. I don't give a. That's just cancel culture being cancel culture. That's just the Twitter mob being the Twitter mob.
But you don't want to be on the other end of that even if it's accidental. You just don't want to be on the other end.
But Laura, no, okay, absolutely. But Laura is doing her homework.
She is.
She is,
and she's making every effort.
I don't see the problem with your particular. Like, I understand why you're afraid, but no.
I mean, as long as you do enough research that you're not Robert Galbraith coming in and being like, I'm going to pronounce that all Native American cultures are identical and are exactly the same and are basically modern new age culture, but propagated backwards into the past because don't we know they're all savages? And I'm going to use the word savage because I'm Robert Galbraith and I'm the greatest writer in the English language. As long as you're not being her.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it's a really tricksy question because in the Blinded Angels story, I have been debating whether or not certain characters are going to come in because I wanted to involve the indigenous people groups that were in the area in the story. And I've been in contact with the tribal council and everything and talking to them. There's no resources that they can send me so that I can purchase that would help me individuate and be talking specifically about them and not just being like, well, every member of the Haudenosaunee were exactly like this. Like, no, they were one of the little brother tribes. Like, I want to make sure that I'm talking to your culture, not some broader thing. So I get the angst that's in there because I don't want to be insulting to a group of people that I am trying to bring into the story. And my solution to that is probably, unfortunately, going to be to cut the character out, just because I don't want to mess up. I don't want to be that person telling that story, and it upsets me a lot. But I am working with a friend of mine from a different tribe in the northern upstate New York, who's been giving me a lot of notes, and I think that character just may switch groups.
But you see, I love that. I mean, that's great. The problem is when people don't give a damn and they just write whatever they perceive as whatever outsider culture, and they just do whatever they wanted without any homework at all. Yeah. And that's a problem, and I agree that would just get on my nerves. But once again,
to see our own blind spots. That's like why we all want sensitivity readers.
Yes.
So not being able to find them, that's scary.
Yeah.
So
that's one of my main... would recommend some sort of pre-release or preview to give only to them. And if they're like, oh no, this is a dumpster fire, then you're like, okay, that will be put away and don't worry, it will never see the light of day. Thank you for letting me know that's a dumpster fire. But they might say, no, I don't see any problems. And that way, when you come back later, individuals will have a problem with things. There will always be someone in any community that's not going to like something. There are things written by Black authors that other Black readers don't like, and they'll rant and complain about it, and there could get gathered, but they didn't do anything wrong. You see what I'm saying?
Mhm.
So there's always going to be someone who's like, oh, well, she used this reference, and my great grandfather was this thing, and I just don't like it. But someone else who read it and has already said, I think that this is great, will say, well, my great grandmother was also this, and I thought it was perfectly fine. But you did everything that you could before that point. You didn't just say, I like this story, so there it is. You know,
the due diligence is very important, and it's like like years ago, like people were like, they got mad at Tony Hillerman because he wrote mysteries down on the Big Res in the Four Corners area, but he was very specific about this is Dene culture, this is Zuni culture, this is Acoma culture, and people were like, no, aren't they all Navajos? No. And Craig Johnson, who wrote the Longmire series that became Netflix, that went like onto Netflix, he makes differences between the Sioux and the Cheyenne cultures. Yes, the reservations are literally next door to each other, but they are very different cultures. And it's, you know, I appreciate that. And while I did enjoy the Craig Johnson books, I have a problem with the series because I know where it was filmed in New Mexico, and it's supposed to be in Wyoming, and
tax credits, man. Tax credits.
I can't look at the scenery because I'm like, oh, I've been there. I know where that is.
Yeah, that's not the place that they're saying it is.
Because as long as you have done the due diligence to know what you're talking about, I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've read a story with either a queer or a trans character that the author did not do basic, like bare bones basic research about what any of those words mean. And like, oh, I just hate the way I look today. I'm dysphoric. Oh God, I wish dysphoria was just, I don't like the way I look today. That would make me so happy. That would make my life so much better if it was, I just don't like the way I look today.
Right? Oh, I just
tomorrow it'll be fine.
Tomorrow it'll be fine.
Don't think
it
works that
biggest aspects of Samoan life is religion. Like all the Christianity in Samoa, like they have Sundays off as a country. And so this whole idea of, do I keep their current cultural ecosystem going on, or do I go back to like
Well, see, this is where sci-fi really...
like, oh my gosh.
This is where sci-fi gives you freedom.
Yeah.
What would a Samoan want to have represent them and want to keep as their culture as they go to the next planet?
As a world builder, I would actually say what would work in the story.
Yeah, what is the integrity of the story?
For example, in my beloved Dune series, the Fremen are Muslims. They are Muslims from Yemen that came out to Arrakis to escape the Empire. That's their origin story. This is why you hear them make reference to the Imams and the Mahdi and things like this. These are things that have trickled down from their older Islamic culture into the modern day. But because of the realities of the world that they're living in, their culture itself had to change. So they're not intrinsically what they were. But if you were to challenge them on that, they would very boldly say, no, we are Fremen. We have always been Fremen. We will always be Fremen. Because that's how cultural identity tends to work.
Because I started weaving the older religions into like the funeral rites, which was really cool to just have the funeral rites be the spectrum of from pre-contact to Christian to future. Because it was the first death of their first Matai, their first chief, because they'd only been down underwater for 50 years. So like that was really cool to explore. But at the same time, it's like, these aren't my personal beliefs. And so I don't want to do them disjustice and feel like I'm just using them to look cool.
And again,
in one of the master classes that I was watching. Oh, go ahead. Sorry,
Larry Niven did this really well with the Ring Worlds is and Integral Trees is they developed like birthrights and funeral rites that involved the world they were living in. And one of the things, and like Larry Niven even had slang for his worlds. And one of these things they would say to each other is, oh, go feed yourself to the tree, or go feed it to the tree, which basically that they had these places where they would basically give the tree the waste.
Yeah, I have a few problems like this in writing steampunk, of course, because I'm dealing with the British. Not that we've ever done anything wrong, but everything wrong.
Nothing wrong.
Last thing.
Nothing
So
wrong.
I could spend my entire time panicking about, have I atoned for this, and this? No, all I can do is write my story and make sure the people in it, I don't repeat the mistakes that were made before. And to do that, I talk to people and I ask people. And yes, sensitivity readers will come into it, because I do have a couple of people of colour, different colours, lots of them, rainbow colours in this story. And I want them all to just be accepted for the people they are. So I think that's the thing that's happening nowadays that didn't happen in the past, is you just proved it. We're all thinking about what we don't want this to carry on. Let's change it. The only way of changing it is if we all do it.
And so, I would highly recommend N.K. Jameson's masterclass, where she talks a lot about creating race and ethnicity in there,
that's the one
from
I was
a very
recommend.
But
I'm only halfway through it so far.
Also, just bear in mind that this is a problem for world building throughout. Like, I don't know how many books I have DNF'd because it was basically like, oh, here's stereotypical Africa, the planet. Here is stereotypical Native American, the planet.
Yeah, and the stereotypical Cockney. Oh, blimey, Maori Cockney.
Oh, yeah.
Jeez, does my head in.
Just regular old Cockneys walking random.
Yeah.
And it's this laziness that you can see in the storytelling, that they're like, oh, we can just make these racist stereotypes, it'll be fine. And I'm just like, this isn't the 1930s anymore. Like, people are gonna notice.
But that's the good thing about fantasy and sci-fi is you do have that freedom to make your own thing. Like I like mine. I've got people of all sorts of different colored skin tones, but they're in their own culture within that city on that planet of another culture that has developed, being divided from this other group of people on this other planet. And
Also,
that's
I like
the
that.
culture that's grown from that and those different locations. It's nothing to do with like the Earth ethnicities as we know them isn't a thing in my world. They're just their own different cultural cities. And like, I've got my militaristic one, which is very, everyone must do some years of service or whatever, and it's very rigid. And I've got other ones which are looser and all types of things like that. So you know, I can just kind of.
And just because the people look a certain way, their culture isn't anything like the Earth culture. I was telling someone before that my fantasy novel has people from different regions, and the people who more originated in specific regions might look African or might look Asian. And I say Asian because East Asian or South Asian because they specifically look different, but they are not from India. They are not from Korea or Japan. So I don't say they look Japanese because that's not, they're their own culture. They just have a similar type of look from people in that region. But they have their own cultures. Whereas my sci-fi, which is futuristic Earth, two of my main characters, one of them is, she's Korean. Her husband is Korean American. They specifically are that, but they're living in space.
What I like about like more complex world building versus the laziness that Charlie just describes about like Africa, the planet. It's like, why do you divide? Like, okay, here is one planet where everyone on that planet is basically African. Why? That's not even realistic.
They finally got together as a continent and they blasted off to another galaxy and was like, this is
sometimes
we'll get along now in space.
Sometimes I think it's an excuse. That's why a lot of times some people like myself will get a little annoyed watching fantasy or sci-fi when everybody's straight and white. It's like, oh, you can't imagine black and brown people in the future, or you can't imagine black and brown people in your fantasy. Okay, this is fun. It's just it's annoying. It is, but
once again, that's why I love Avatar, because like there was everything in that.
Yes. Yeah.
But they were all their own distinct, unique cultures. Like you can see the world building so well in there, which is why everyone who talks about world building immediately talks about Avatar.
Yes.
Because it is a masterclass in how to pull that off, and a miracle that it happened on American TV.
I think
that unicorn of a show.
Hello Future Me, when they do
and there is a blind character.
They do not have a single video that does not reference Avatar in some way.
and the best part of all, there's a blind character and she doesn't die. She's there and she's cool.
She kicks
she's
butt.
No, okay, that's great, but she's treated equally as the rest of the cast. I don't care if she has to be a badass or not. I mean, of course she's fantastic, but she's treated equally. There's no special treatment for Toph unless it's an on the nose comment on, as you can see, I'm blind and these three imbeciles are my valet. Sorry. I want to be a voice actress when I grow up. Yeah, but that's like the only fantasy where I feel safe. Like Avatar, I'm on Avatar Facebook groups. I'm on the Avatar communities, and when it's like you're like a real world Toph, and I'm like, yes, I am, and I feel safe because that happened. But then I open a fantasy book, rolling, and every blind monster has to die, and everyone with a disability is not allowed in this world, and everyone has to be cured, and everybody has to, and I'm like, oh no, please no, another day, no thank you. So it is, and it is exclusively, like I see it a lot with blindness. I have heard about stories where it happened with someone in a wheelchair, but I have seen it less. So like the whole thing about blindness being so bad that it has to be rather killed or cured, and I'm like, wow, like okay, but why? And then I just avoid it. And I don't want to be demotivated when I read. So I obviously I avoid it. So that's like my biggest bone to pick is that one. And and the stereotypical sexy hot Latina stereotype in whatever book you find, not just fantasy, but I'm like, yeah, okay, I'm an asexual Latina. What are you gonna do with me?
And if I can do the corollary to that, can we stop with, but that's the way it actually was? Because you're writing a fantasy book. You're writing like George R.R. Martin, like justifying the misogyny and homophobia in his work because that's how it was in the Middle Ages. Your books don't take place in the Middle Ages, George. You invented this world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you could make it whatever you want.
You can make it whatever you want. Like if you want to make a comment on those things, which you're clearly not doing, by the way, then you could have it in there and make a comment about it and, actually make it an issue. But just because historically society progressed at a certain rate in our actual world does not mean that's how it has to be in a fantasy or sci-fi world at all. You don't have to import the bigotries that exist in our world into your world for realism's sake. Realism is about internal consistency, that the story sets up its rules, plays by its rules, and doesn't break its own rules in ways that destroy the setting. Because it is possible to break a rule in a way that, that rule wasn't explained properly. There are ways to do that in fantasy, especially, but it's tricky. But that's what realism is about. It's that the world actually operates in a way that is understandable and intelligible to the reader,
so that you can suspend your disbelief.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so you don't have to import all of the bias unless it matters.
And to be fair, society wasn't as okay. There were some episodes, World War II, World War I. Yeah, okay. There were some really bad episodes in history, but society wasn't all that regressive and ableist and misogynist and this and that as people want us to believe. So like the excuse of it's historically accurate, it's not, honey. Have you actually done your research, or are you just going off of stereotypical mainstream biases?
It's a wonderful way to give yourself an excuse to be nasty to other groups of people and be like, oh, it's not my fault. I'm not actually racist. I'm not the sexist one. See, the time period just lets me be horrible to people.
Sure. Yeah.
Methinks thou dost write too many races.
So I think, and
you are the writer. Yeah, go ahead.
I think though a very important thing that needs to be remembered in all of this though is not to tokenize anything. So it's good to have all of that representation, but don't make it a cliche or a token or a trope that like loses that good meaning and that good intention that you're trying to put forward.
Yeah. Like you have a gay character, but the gay character doesn't do anything, doesn't say anything, has no agency, has no storyline, and is just there
It's just there to die.
Or the black character is just there to say, "I've got a black person." See,
or even if it's not that, you don't want to
will ever be known.
You don't necessarily want to have
character.
Yeah.
There's
And
no
like
such thing as a
it's
solitary
not just not wanting to have the only gay person getting killed off. It's not. You also have to be mindful of having, say, you have a group of main characters and they're all one of each thing and blah 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 blah, because then that kind of rubs people the wrong way as well. So there's a balance.
You've got to have a bit of historical accuracy in there if you're going to use characters. And the point is, to me, you've only got characters in there because they serve the story.
Right.
Because you need them to tell the story you want to tell. So if you are going on the checklist, got that one, then what is the point? Just please.
Well, I think one thing that started, we started seeing this back in the 1980s with science fiction movies, and is the I don't know how to say this that's not going to trigger someone, so I'm just going to say it. The required or obligated minority or minority gendered person. You are obligated to have a minority character. It was the black character or the Hispanic character. Now it's now Gerlin Habib. That has become the obligatory minority character in science, and it's in science fiction now too, that you have this character who is only there to serve the purpose of, but I have this required diversity. And I think that's something that science fiction and fantasy authors, we have this ability, because we can stretch our culture and move away from the IRL. We can get away without having that. And we need to be extreme, and you can't, pushing authors, like Laura's being super careful with her Samoan spacefaring story. And it is, I appreciate that. I appreciate that she is embracing the tribal culture of a people that are being marginalized in ways that I can't even imagine. And I grew up in the United States as a Native American woman. So I appreciate that. But then there's also a thing of, we need to be very careful as science fiction and fantasy writers, because there's this big rant going around right now that Tolkien had no black characters. But the question you have to ask is, did he know any black people?
Highly unlikely.
No. You can't write people you don't know. You can do all the research in the world, but unless you actually know someone from that culture that you're trying to put into your book, you have to be very, very careful.
Right. And that's
also
why with Tolkien, I read Tolkien. I have no problem with Tolkien. I even like, you can see them. I like the movies and whatnot. I just wish that by the year 2000, it's an elf. It's not even a human. It can't be a person of color.
Like
it's just
casting-wise, you mean?
they did not want to do that.
Like you're talking about casting for the show?
Yeah. Like the fact that Tolkien wrote what he knew, that didn't bother me. He wrote it way back when. That's, that is what it is. Things have changed. I would expect, or I would think that if it was written today with so many different cultures that he wrote, that would be different if it was written today. I would think it would be, but so I don't, or me personally, I don't look at that. But when you're once you go to adapt it today,
that's something.
If you can't imagine that an elf, the only creatures that are black or brown are the evil ones. That's the problem.
That's one of the things that
you can't imagine black and brown. Just not black and brown. Good creature.
Good. Yeah.
That's one of the things I've been enjoying about the adaptation of Foundation is you could see that they really did go in trying to find the best actors for the parts. And yeah, it's kind of odd that Selwyn is a girl now, but yes, please, more of her. Like, I thought the character was very boring in the book. I'm enjoying the TV show version of the character. Like, the actor that works for the part.
This was an interesting thing with Altered Carbon. With Altered Carbon, gender and ethnicity no longer mattered. Because you could pull out your stack and literally put it into anybody you wanted. And the one interesting thing is the girl who ended up with a synthetic body. She was a black girl, and she chose to make her synth body the body that she had lost. But you see them, like you see the main character, and he jumps between male and female sleeves and all different races. So it's very interesting in sci-fi and fantasy of you're developing these new races, you're developing these new cultures. I have a thing with my Etherians where, because the Etherians lived on Earth, I now have Etherians of every color. Because they all have some human in them. They all have some human DNA. And even though on the trip home, the hibernation beds removed most of their human DNA because they assumed the healing beds assumed the human DNA was a mistake. And so to heal them, it started removing them, but they still retained these ethnic traits that their families had married into. But they developed a new form of bias, which was, well, how much Etherian are you? And they had, because of this, they developed this. There was a group that were these elitists who were like, well, you're not Etherian enough. And they looked down on humans because humans didn't have redundant physiologies. Humans didn't have a 10,000 year lifespan. So it's very interesting, and I've seen this like in other series and stuff where, unfortunately, as a species, we tend to look for what is different and single that out as bad. And if you look into science fiction and fantasy in both genres, you see things where they target different groups and they create the bias.
It's also really important, especially when you're putting in a character that is not an identity that you share. Know what the negative tropes are around that whatever it is, that thing, and don't employ them. Like, try to stay away from them, because like this is what got Star Trek into so much trouble. Yay, we finally got an out gay character on a main show, and then they immediately buried one of them. Oh, and it happened to be the person of color. So that's a two. You got two there.
I remember that.
And then also with Star Trek, I think it was Zulu, the actor, was asked, hey, do you want us to make your character gay because you are? And he's like, yeah, but my character's not gay. Just because me as an actor might be gay doesn't necessarily mean that my character is. And that in itself can be considered an insult, because that's the whole thing as well and in itself.
Yeah.
Well, I think the thing we need to hold on to most as science fiction and fantasy writers is the authenticity of our voices.
Yes.
And this goes all the way back to us talking about the mass marketing stuff in the very first hour when we were talking about it, is we need to, what is your favorite trope, science fiction or fantasy? What is your least favorite science fiction or fantasy? And then as an author, you have to write that line to keep the authenticity of your world. And how much of your world are you willing to give up? I know that Tom is reading my sci-fi series, and he was really uncomfortable with how I portrayed these murderous females. But that's their culture. They have this cultural entitlement because you want an heir? I want half your estate. Oh, did I kill your brother in the last round of the lottery? Sorry. Here, take this drug so you can't resist. And so keeping the authenticity of your voice is extremely important, even when it makes people uncomfortable. But you have to tread that thin line of not presenting the toxic tropes. And you also have to remember that we look at it through the goggles of the times we live in. In 50 and 100 years, they're going to be wearing different goggles, just like we look back at Asimov and Tolkien through the goggles of today.
I don't do that. So maybe I'm not in the States. Maybe that's a cultural thing. I don't do that. I don't look at things from the past with the goggles of today because, hey, that was written how many years ago? I just don't do that. Why would I do that? But then again, I'm not in the States. So there I go.
It's not just the States. It's most of Europe also. Look at things.
This is why we've been talking about
viewpoint.
And this is why we've been talking about tropes so much, because you need to know what you're willing to fight for. Like, if you're not willing to fight for it and you accidentally put it in the book, that puts you in a very uncomfortable position.
No, absolutely.
Knowledge is power. Knowledge is power. Make sure
absolutely.
that you know
We
what
all
battles you may
know.
accidentally be setting up for yourself.
Yeah.
We all
and
screw.
and
We all
this
screw
is
up.
that my one friend lets me say that, or my one friend is
Oh.
like, no, just no.
No.
So-
absolutely no. I
On
agree
that
there
note,
that yeah.
We're about to take another bio break. I would like to once again make a recommendation that if you don't have liquids to imbibe, maybe now's a wonderful time. Maybe now's a wonderful time to chug it. I'm just throwing that out there. Or have a little walkabout. Maybe, just take a few minutes to yourself. Or if you've been inspired, quickly dash off a couple hundred words. Enjoy. And with that, we're going to take a short break. When we come back, we're going to discuss final thoughts, the things that we think will help improve genre writing for fantasy and science fiction, any solutions. So now's a great time to make pitches in the chat if you've got hey, how do I fix this? And our panel will come together and we'll use this hive mind for good and maybe, mild chaotic evil. I don't know. I make no promises.
I'm not even sure the worst line I've ever written in my adult sci-fi.
Good job. So with that, we will see you back here in approximately 10 minutes. And we're going to, because everybody keeps talking about science fiction and Star Trek, we're going to use the Star Trek timer today because, of course, we are. And we will see y'all back here in just a few minutes. Claxons. Somebody. Yes, Tom came over. And we lost track of time. Well, he's like, okay, and this, and this, and this. And I'm like, yes, okay. As well as I was also reading the lovely plotting going on backstage in the chat. Excellent work, y'all. You're doing such a great job. I know I'm certainly enjoying being here today. Oh, what did you do?
This is the witch that's gonna go on my front door. I'm gonna make I'm gonna trace my daughter's body on a garbage bag, and that's gonna be like the dress part. And she's totally got like the Winifred Sanderson hair, and
Oh, that's fantastic.
it's gonna look fun.
It's awesome.
Nice.
Good stuff. All right. So, did everybody have a lovely break, or?
I played fetch.
Yay! I'm sure Roy Ben had a good break.
Oh yes.
Hubby topped off my water.
I talked with Amy about culture and body modifications in the view of cyberpunk.
Mhm.
Yeah,
I think
I
that's.
popcorn and talk to Tom about all the things he wanted to.
Oh dear. No, I think it's definitely a topic to discuss because, in terms of the whole cultural aspect of things and how people feel about different aspects of, I don't know, their culture and life and society, that definitely plays a strong part in the cyberpunk world because it is so built on societal implications and influences and things that go on. And in regards to the body modification, that can definitely come into play because augmentation is a massive thing in a lot of cyberpunk kind of areas. Less so in others, but it's definitely kind of touched on here and there. But in reference to, say, like the cyberpunk, so cyberpunk is the genre, but there's also the role-playing game, the tabletop role-playing game, Cyberpunk 2020, which was recently being made into the Cyberpunk 2077 video game. And that very much touches on how body modification and the cybernetic augmentations can impact a culture and the society and make divides and have different opinions, because in that world they have gangs or factions, and some factions are completely against any kind of body modification. So you've got people branching off into their own small sections of factions with their own different opinions. You've also got the whole other side of things where there are also factions in that world that are completely fully into the body modification, the augmentations, and then that can impact how they interact with the different people with different beliefs in society and can cause a lot of problems as well.
Sorry,
it's okay.
The first thing that popped to mind when you said being all into modifications was Cassandra in Doctor Who. Just basically the trampoline.
Moisturize me.
Definitely.
Yes. That's what I thought about.
And how they did discuss, well, at what point do you stop being human?
Mm-hmm. Yes, definitely.
Or the last human.
Yeah, but that is what I like about science fiction and fantasy. There's plenty of room to discuss moral philosophy.
Yeah.
And it feels natural. Yeah, it's a natural way, because like you're like, hey, there's this new technology or there's this new circumstance. What are the philosophical implications of it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Take the reader along with you.
Yeah, there's a lot of that in my sci-fi where, you know, some things went wrong with people who had augmentations. So they're actually 100 years backwards, and it's referenced a lot that we would be further ahead if this bad thing hadn't happened that made everybody kind of weary of certain type of augmentations, robotics and whatnot. And then there's a particular culture that doesn't believe in having any at all. And then there's that line between, because it is the future, I don't like to say that they fixed that or they necessarily cured that, because I like the idea that these people still had these things, but because of technology or because of medicine, this is what it is to have this particular thing now. Such as this is what it is to, if you are blind, you are allowed to have this particular augmentation that will help you to be able to see the way that anybody else who is sighted can see, but you don't have to have that augmentation if you don't want to.
But then you can get backlash within that society because then you're against the norm. So whatever is not the norm or the common can have a lot of like friction. But it was interesting.
The same thing with if someone loses a limb. But I live in a community. We have a lot of veterans, and so it's not uncommon to see people who have, artificial limbs on a regular. Like, I think when I was a kid, because I also grew up on military bases, when I would first see it, it would be like, I'd be like, oh, what is that? But then you get used to it. You don't even think anything of it. All that was a service member who lost a leg or an arm, and it's just becomes part of your normal life. But I have to understand that everybody didn't grow up in areas like I did. I grew up on military bases, so I'm not only am I used to seeing people of all different colors and races, and just genders and all of that in my community. It's weird to me when people tell me, oh yeah, there were only straight white people, and if anybody was gay, we didn't know it. It was just all white people. I didn't see my first black person until I was 10. I'm like, what? It's still weird to me when people tell me things like that. I'm like, because it's such an antithesis to what I grew up with.
Yeah,
so I feel like something is normal. Other people might not think that that's the norm.
Yeah, I grew up where we were the only white family on the block. It kind of became a running joke among our neighbors, but
it's a weird thing to think about both ways around, because I had so many experiences when I was younger. I basically have successfully surrounded myself in queer bubbles almost everywhere I've been, that now that I've been stretching outside of those and remembering this is straight world beyond the protective garden wall, it's very strange the other way around, in that we had really put these walls up to protect ourselves from having to deal with all of that for such a long time.
I've been to several places, and it didn't really matter where I was, because I could be in Latin America or I could be in Europe, Northern Europe, Central Europe, whatever Europe, and I was always treated like an exotic alien from far away, regardless of where I was. So I have the experience of, look, I've seen so many people from so many colors and so many countries and languages, and to all of them, I am an exotic being from another planet. So it's just the norm for me, is that everyone in the world is different, and maybe that's why I don't. Also, because of blindness, I don't make a fuss about it, because it's like, to me, it's like people are just people. But then again, that's my own experience, and then I know that a lot of people outside don't think like me, precisely because I was always labeled like this other thing from another planet. Even and then I understand, like, whatever I perceive being a blind minority in a sense of the word minority, it's not the same as someone who grew up in a small town where everyone was white and homogeneous. Like, my perception from their perception is going to be very different, and there's a level of respect, I guess. I mean, I cannot change how they were raised in this world. I can only share my own thing, and they share theirs, and we can, like, maybe learn from each other depending on how open we are to that exchange.
And like Lori says all the time, and yes, I do quote you, like when I have this conversation, like with general audiences, not just here. You know, our brains are wonderfully dumb, and they can't tell the difference between a person in a book and an actual person. So this is one of the most wonderful things about writing, is that you are sharing these intimate experiences from the points of view of the characters that will have a good chance of being able to broaden the mind of the person that you're writing to. I mean, I say it all the time, you know, writing is the closest thing we have to telepathy, where I put thoughts down on paper and then you pick them up and put them into your brain.
Right.
You know, it's the closest thing we have to mass telepathy. And that's a very powerful tool that we all have. And I think some people need to respect that more. Robert? Sorry.
Well, and now we have so many mediums to do that with. It's not just the written word anymore. It's the visual word, the recorded word. Like Amy mentioned, the tabletop game, Cyberpunk 2020, there are now all these overlaps. And like one of the most common ways that's developing to communicate information like this is video games. I think the Detroit Become Human game that was popular 2-3 years ago still has this immense community. It makes you question what is human.
I think Mass Effect is actually, it's a sci-fi game, and I think that really gets into a lot of these racial points very strongly, because there is so much mixed culture, and because you can influence your main character's choices, it can be a learning experience for the player as to seeing how other characters then react. Like, there are scenes where you are put in a position where you have to side with people who are being blatantly racist against another species, and you know that they're totally not in the wrong, but what do you do? And so it gives you those options of interaction. I think that's the good thing about the gaming side of things, is it gives that other level of interaction and learning experience, and seeing how these people react to different things.
Well, it brings to question, does your voice come out of your character's mouth, or does their voice?
That's
Also,
one of my biggest struggles with adult literature that I write, is I just write how I talk, and like in my drabbles, usually it's more omniscient, and so it's my narrator voice, Roy. Anyway, but in my middle grade, it's fun to dive more into what does the kid know, what does the kid not know, how can I surprise him, like the crazy plant lady is asking him to bring the acidic soil, so he's like, acid soil? What the heck is going on? Trying to kill us all. So just try to figure out the limited knowledge of your character so you can surprise them and circumvent them, but also your character can still surprise you. So that's really fun.
I'm having
I agree.
I'm having a lot of fun because I'll pop into like my antagonist's head once in a while, so you could see them plotting, and you're along the ride with them, while also the main group has no idea. They're going about their life trying to figure out the mystery, and they're just back there like.
But it's
I
good
have my
having-
moments of that as well. Oops.
That's right.
Go ahead.
It's good having like multiple characters though, because I've got quite a few main characters all getting the spotlight, and they all come from such various backgrounds. So I'd say my number one main character is probably closer to my voice, but then everyone else, because they have different backgrounds, that influences how they interact with the world. So I've got one person who grew up rich and privileged and has been thrown into the backstreet alleys of the cyberpunk world, and he's like freaking out. But then he's also getting a lot of tension and friction between one of my other characters who grew up in the poorer sections of things with no parents and orphans and all that. And that then changes how they interact with each other and how they go about different problems in the world as well, because of their beliefs that they were raised with and the worlds that they were raised with.
Well, talking of the orphan trope, how do you authors feel about the bleed from the YA dystopia of the parents must die trope into science fiction and fantasy now?
Well, I kind of didn't just say parents dead. I kind of was like, nah, mum abandoned him, and then dad stuck around, and then he ticked off too, and then he was kind of left and he doesn't know anything about it.
I completely took that trope and ran away with it, because it's like, okay, yeah, kid. Okay, what's my story about? It's about a kid who was born in a laboratory in space. So where is he from? Well, it's complicated. So who are his parents? Are the genetic engineers who made him, or the DNA donors who don't even know they use their DNA to have a kid? Or and I don't know. And then who's the father figure? Is this other man who adopted the kid after the engineers just died? So technically he's not an orphan, but kinda. But maybe he's not. But he doesn't know who his DNA parents are. So and he has never been to Earth. So he is an orphan, but not really. But yes, but no. And then you start to see the ethic issues, the ethical problems of genetically modified people in space. Now you see it. Yes, you see it. Okay, so I just took that orphan trope and run with it, and it's like, no, I'm gonna do whatever I want.
Yeah, for me, it depends on which character, because I've done a combination of both. But I think that one of the main reasons why YA and sometimes middle grade, why they kill off the parents, is because no parent is going to let their children do these insane things. Me, a mom of 4, I'm always telling my kids, if before you do any type of challenge, text me what it is. So
That's
I can
because
tell you
that's
don't
because
do it.
you're a
Because
good
I'm here to save your life.
That's
No
because
parent is just going to let their child run off and do God knows what. We're trying to save our children so that they can grow up to be adults. Where
that's because you're a good parent.
Or whatever. Yeah.
But not everyone's a good parent, and that's what happens to my character. And then that's the thing, is not everyone's a good parent, and that influences
or you
trauma.
Otherwise remove the children
Yes.
from send them to a school, or have something happen that separates them from the parent. There's other ways to do it, but I think that I don't want to say it's lazy, because it's popular, because it also pulls at the heartstrings, that the parents are gone. Exactly. So it pulls at the heartstrings. Because I've heard, just killing off the parents, that's lazy. I don't think it's lazy. I think it works.
What you got?
It evokes emotion, because that's so sad that they lost their parents, and now they've got the weight of the world on their shoulder because they've got to do this, grand adventure thing. So it's a trope that works, and a trope that we accept. But I'm gonna get
personal. I'm gonna get personal, but so my life is a trope, because I'm writing, I'm sci-fiing something that's very personal to me. I am the exotic alien from another planet that no one understands how is she the way she is, and so I'm a trope now. Okay, whatever. I just don't want to write a memoir. I made it a sci-fi, so I take it kind of, when people say that the orphan trope is lazy, or is that this and that, and I'm like, okay, what about people who actually don't have parents, or found adoptive parents later in life? So am I so my life is lazy? Okay. There is everything in the world that we can take and make a story out of. So
I tap danced into the void on this one. Like, in rejecting heteronormativity, like, most of the species in my setting don't have traditional parent groups. Like, that's not even a possibility. Like,
of course,
the stories are primarily about
that makes
found
sense.
family.
Yeah.
Okay, Colin, what you got, honey?
No, it's Laura. I was waiting for it to speak.
Okay, Laura. Laura's got her evil laugh.
Where's your hand raised so we can see it?
Oh, Laura.
Okay, so
It's always the quiet ones, y'all. I'm just saying.
in
Laura
my
will be with us
YA,
next week for horror. I'm just throwing that out there. Anyway.
in my YA sci-fi, soft sci-fi fantasy, whatever. my main character, spoilers for the first chapter.
Spoiler,
She
baby.
has parents. I kill them off one at a time for maximum impact.
Oh, you're really going for
Laura.
it. Come on.
It's
I'm gonna
like,
call you
Oh.
Disney soon. Anyway,
oh,
once,
he died.
you break
Oh,
us again.
they died, but they came back. Oh, now they died, and it's like, oh, all the heart
I'm
possible,
telling
and then give them the parental figure that didn't want them in the first place to be the surrogate mother to raise them as a tutor, and just wrench those heartstrings.
if I may, while we're talking about this, I do have maybe an unusual story to quickly dispense. There is a homemade movie that if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. I'd be happy to help you get this movie. And it is called Adaptation. Specifically, it's an Indiana Jones adaptation that some kids down on the Mississippi Gulf Coast made in the 80s. I know these kids. I knew these kids when I was a kid, and then now I know them as adults. So, and I have talked to them. I've also been to talks they've given in the last 10 years about how did you get away with making these things? So here's the specific story I want to tell you about this. So if you watch the movie, and I do hope you do, the special effects are actually rather fascinating. Because at one point they did accidentally set someone's basement on fire. In that they actually set it on fire, but it got away from them. But Glory, these were a bunch of like elementary school aged kids, and they set a basement on fire. How did any adult approve? They did have adult supervision. It was a beach bum that the family neighborhood knew, and they hired him as their adult supervision, and he was like, yeah, do what you want. And then there was a fire. So anyway, there's more to that I don't want to take up, but I just want to point out you can be loved by parents who genuinely tuck you in every night and love you and still make bad inciting incidents decisions. And you can have conflict adventure and still be loved and not have to kill off any parents. By the way, the parents did not fire the beach bum after the fire.
Mm-hmm.
He was just like, okay, let's not do so much fire. So then they exploded things on a back bay for the explosion scenes. Y'all really need to watch this movie if you haven't seen it.
But did all the children survive? If so, then
all the children survived.
He did his job.
The monkey was replaced by one of the family dogs named Snickers, and Snickers lived a long, normal lifespan. There's more to that later. But anyhow, I just want to point out there are ways to have fun with even young protagonists without killing people off or having terrible parents.
Stranger Things is a good example. Involve the parent in the mystery.
Oh, yeah.
Get them involved.
Parents like,
I just killed them off in both mine.
In one of my stories, I also have the chosen one aspect, but the person gets chosen when they are like 6. And so there's no way they can live up to the expectations as a 6-year-old to do it. And so they grow up with this, I'm a failure, I didn't do it. And then by the time they meet the person that chose them again, they're like, how could you? And just let her have it. And it's just, yes.
Like, did you not know I was 6? Why was I chosen? Why would you do this to me?
They're like, you were the only one around.
I was mostly concerned with coloring, you know.
I just remember the one I've got called the Unchosen One, because it's the thing of the trope. And it's her sister who's the chosen one who gets drunk and gets killed by a bus. So they then come to her and say, well, you're next in line. But she didn't know she had a sister. So that is a comedy. But yeah, similar idea,
though.
So we never actually answered the big question of the day was, is science fiction fantasy or is fantasy science fiction?
Yes.
I think they overlap.
Yeah. I think science fiction, particular to the point where you're really legitimately having to make stuff up. I mean, there's so much of science fiction that we like already were pulling from things that are subconsciously in our head, but there's stuff that you can still just make up stuff in sci-fi. Or so then what is that? It doesn't exist. It's not real. You just
I think just about all fiction is fantasy, period. Like happy endings. I mean, like, not to be nihilistic about this, but at what point do you judge it's an ending? You know, it's you find a stopping point and you go, there, we're done telling the story. I'm going to bed now. You know, like that's it. So I'm of the opinion of all fiction to varying degrees is fantasy. Otherwise, it would be nonfiction, wouldn't it? Because we have to make something fantastical for it to be a story worth paying attention to.
You don't think it's realistic, Glory, that someone might come knock on your door and say, hey, guess what? You're a princess. You didn't know?
I'm not saying that's happened, Nia, but I still live in a hovel.
I still wait for my Hogwarts life.
Charlie just losing it. Like, you don't know my life.
See, that's the great thing about cyberpunk. There's more freaking cyberpunk in the real world than there is in my novel.
Exactly.
So I'm pulling things from the news. It's very easy.
That woman with depression and brain implant. Like, I'm like,
I mean, can I at least have the aesthetic? Like, I don't want to get weird looks when I go out in my leather jacket and my leather pants. Can I at least, you know, be accepted for my neon eyelashes and stuff?
Cooling vinyl trench coats. Like,
yeah,
I'm tired of sweating while looking amazing as a vinyl
totally
potato.
worth it.
You know,
I live for the weird looks, but you know.
Oh yeah, that is my wardrobe. I mean,
like, I have had to fight off. I have a beautiful black like jacket, and do you know how many people try to take this from me? And it's like, no, do you see how it fits? Do you know what I had to do in this world to get it? You may not have it. I look amazing. But yeah, like, so what did the rest of y'all think? Do you think science fiction is fantasy or fantasy is science fiction?
I think that I'm sticking to my guns that they're extremely different things for extremely different purposes. Like science fiction is the place that is very much about the question what if, and answering the philosophical and moral questions to that. And I get fairly bored with science fiction that isn't doing that, because I really feel like that's the purpose. That's what makes the genre happen. It's like reading a romance where no one falls in love. Like the purpose, the whole point of being is make me think about something. And the same thing is true with my fantasy stories. You know, I really want a story that makes me feel something. You know, to go back to what Joseph Campbell said about all good stories, they should give you the feeling of being alive. And that's what we seek entertainment for. That's what we tell stories to each other for, is to find that feeling of being alive. And I that to me is at its max in fantasy, because you are not constrained by any of the limitations of the actual terrestrial world in which we're caged.
And you got Bohemian Rhapsody in my head.
And that's why I think people are writing a space opera that's not going to involve any of the technology or involve any of the other things that you were talking about, Charlie. But they're writing a space opera is what I call it, because it takes place in the future, and it takes place maybe on a spaceship or on another planet that's been colonized. But that's all that there is that would qualify it as sci-fi. I think that they really need to let the readers know going in that that's not what it's about. Because I read a book and I did like the book, but I could see why a lot of people who went in reading the book for sci-fi were like, this is not sci-fi just because it takes place on a spaceship. That's it. You're just told it takes place on a spaceship, and that's it. Nothing else. It could have been anywhere. And that's not sci-fi to me either, but I get it. You know, I thought it was going to be a little bit more sci-fi also. I missed that, you know, aspect.
But if something's not going to be...
the drama part of it, was like, was right. You know what I mean?
I think that's an important question to ask, though. If the setting doesn't have any bearing on the story, why am I choosing this setting?
Exactly. That's my main gripe with most of genre fiction right now, is that very thing. Is if this could happen down the street from my house, why are there spaceships in it? Like
Yeah.
literally, I live as far away from spaceships as possible. Like Luke would come to my town and be like, "Oh, honey, you got it bad." You know? I thought I was at the
That's a
place
mood
furthest
right
from the
there.
shining center of the galaxy. Oh no, I didn't
Drink
know
my
this
tea.
existed. Like,
Even with my historical fiction, I have a lot of things that are dependent on the setting, and I've struggled with some of them as far as setting, because I'm like, I need this to take this amount of time. I need travel to take this amount of time. I need this kind of scenery because this is how I visualize this specific event in the story, and the scenery plays into that. The setting plays into so much into the travel and impacts the timeline significantly, that if a place is too far away, it doesn't work, and if it's too close, it doesn't work. Also, the means of travel is impacted. Is it going to be by boat or by train? Or, is this an area where they would still have to travel on horseback? Like, you have to know all of those kinds of things, and that comes into play with the setting. But if none of that stuff matters, then why choose that specific setting?
Yep.
Yeah, I must admit, I've got airships in the new one. So
Oh,
I am trying to actually explain how they're possible, which of course means moving the discovery of helium as a separate gas back by about 25 years.
That's not
hey,
that big
I
of a
haven't
wiggle.
worked out the facts for that. But watch my episode tomorrow. All about waterboarding.
Ooh, that sounds interesting. Yes.
Unashamed plug.
An example of why that can be important, this is specifically from, Outlander is historical fiction, but it also has some fantasy elements, which
supernatural.
It's very clearly called out that way, but they stay in play in the story for a lot of it. They also explain some of the choices of setting, and it is an integral part of the story. But also, when the author changes something from being factual to being in a different time period, or shift something around, she even has a section I believe it's in the foreword, where she says, or it might be afterward, where she says, "Hey, I know that I did X, Y, and Z, and this isn't how it happened in history, and here's why I did it differently." But if you don't know the purpose of any of that stuff, then you also can't explain it and be like, "Hey, I'm not an idiot. I do know X, Y, and Z."
Yeah, I understand that this happened at a different time, but it fit in with my story, so that's why I put it here instead of there. I understand it's fiction. Go with it with me. And then I feel like, okay, yeah, I can do that. Instead of feeling like this author doesn't even know the time period she's writing about.
Which ruins credibility. And if you want your readers to take other leaps with you, they're like, "Why should I? You don't even know this basic thing."
Yeah.
Well, I think that science fiction to fantasy, I think it's a sliding scale with the sci-fan in the middle. And on the edges where you have science fiction and where you have fantasy, you have your hard rule systems. Magic has a cost. If you overuse your magic, either you're going to die or pass out. It's like in The Witcher, magic has, they show very specifically, magic has a cost. If you use energy without drawing energy from someone else, your body pays the price. And on the other end of the spectrum, in science fiction, if you don't have an explanation for warp drive technology or cellular regeneration or time travel, if you don't have that, then you start sliding back toward the middle where it's science fantasy. And the same thing with the magic systems. If you don't have a cost, if you don't have an explanation, you start sliding back toward that science fantasy where you're in this area where you don't have to explain anything.
Yeah, your readers will only accept so much hand waving.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think another thing that really happens with sci-fan, the science fantasy middle ground, is I call it tropism. And it's where the author's writing and they're like, "Oh, that looks cool. That looks cool." And they just start dumping everything into the pot. And instead of ending up with a good soup, you end up with something your chickens won't eat. Because
That's
you
pretty
put
bad.
too much stuff in it. And you see this happening a lot with like a lot of like I'm trying to think of the name of this show. Supernatural. Supernatural. I appreciate the hotties in it, but after after the third season, after the third season, I was like, just.
But hotties, does it matter?
Hotties,
right?
Just hotties.
Sometimes the hotties aren't enough.
No, it's
I want the story.
It depends how single you are. I will say it depends how single you are.
You're wrong,
really
Maggie. According
really
to
feel
my
what
daughter,
Maggie's-
you can put every single creature and being in that show, and it will still be the best.
I think though, after a while, when you start adding everything to the soup, you lose conflict because you're like, oh, but this could overpower that. And then you start to also create more plot holes for yourself because you're like, why didn't you bring this thing back? Because I know you're friends with Jim Bob, and Jim Bob could totally kill that guy. And where's Jim Bob? You haven't explained where Jim Bob is.
Stargate actually
Where's the rest
did
of
do
the
that a little bit.
Avengers?
Stargate did do that. Stargate.
They forget tech they introduced that could have fixed the problem.
Like,
they
no,
always
but
lost their ships.
Don't you have the thing? Oh, I guess we're gonna pretend we don't have the thing.
They always blew up the ships that they had. It really annoyed me.
Wasn't it the thing
like, God
with
damn it.
Tolkien, really? If the Eagles were that big and good, couldn't they have just given the ring and flown them to Mordor?
Actually, they did explain that in the book in The Hobbit. They did actually explain it in The Hobbit.
Did
So.
they?
Yeah.
It's been many years since I read The Hobbit.
That's all right.
Love Lord of the Rings.
But I really feel what Maggie's talking about, because when I was developing the epic fantasy that I'm doing right now, there was such a desire to be like everything, and the chicken that the chickens want and that the chickens don't want, just everything, just throw everything into it. Because
I mean,
but
I feel you, Charlie. I do.
This is
And
where world
it's
building.
another thing with pantser writers. There's a pantser writer who writes in werewolf. She does science fiction, and she actually has a werewolves in space. And it literally, we were on a stream one time and we got talking about this. But she's a pantser writer, and when she writes her first draft, she goes off just on whatever she's reading, and she goes off into this, and it's like, where are you going, Mary? Where are you going? And
I have a very specific question about this.
And
if they're in space, how does the moon trigger them to turn, or are they just perpetually turned?
Well, the Earth was basically destroyed, and so the joke was they're in Jupiter's orbit with its, and there's now 87 moon goddesses, and none of them are helping me. But it's the thing is I think, like, because of the spectrum, science fiction to fantasy with the sci-fan in the middle, that sci-fan really leans itself to the pantser writers who don't world build, who don't plot, and it's the end bookends, like me and Charlie and Colin, who will build out of a world and have to stop building to start writing. The harder systems lean to us as plotters and plantsers, but as a pantser writer, they fall into that sci-fan, and that's where you get everything in the kitchen sink in the soup.
Which is one of the reasons
I've come up with a solution to the travesty that is happening to science fiction and fantasy. We need to collectively get together and write a scary movie type science fiction fantasy rebuttal, kind of like they did with Into the Woods. And in the end, Cthulhu kills us all, but we escape in Colin's airship.
Yes.
Oh,
And
there's no escape.
we don't know how the
Darkness.
airship can get through space without, imploding, and we're not freezing to death. We're not
We're not freezing to death because the
A spaceship has
augmentations,
no engines.
the augmentations that have saved us.
Yeah, no aliens.
See, this is why I've always
God.
pushed John Bonnet's Stealing Fire from the Gods, because as a pantser at heart, even though I do plan a lot of my stuff out now, a lot more than I used to, that model that he puts forward in there is so helpful to anybody who's pantsing, because you just create the loops, you create this broad image of what the world is, and then anything that you create, you just hold it up and look and see, does this piece fit? If it doesn't, you need to change it to fit back into that model and keep yourself going. There are ways that can be reined in. It's just, again, when you're going for mass market in any of these places, whether it's with the books, the comics, the movies, the games, well, I don't know, UFOs are really hot right now. Let's throw an alien in this.
Yeah.
Okay, though, honestly, I wouldn't be mad if there was a fantasy world where an alien showed up.
I worked on a movie. I don't know if I can tell you which one it was, but I worked on one. It came out. And through the entire process, they had already filmed the whole thing. We were doing the effects, and they couldn't decide which ending they wanted to go with. Do we want to go with, like, volcano, or do we want to go with, like, UFO alien? And so this whole time we're working on the movie, doing all these effects, and they're like, which one are we going? Roll the die. And so we were like, what? How is this not integral to the plot?
This is true, but I'm thinking kind of like at the end of the movie, you find out that all of the fantasy stuff, it's really just an alien like theme park or zoo.
No Indiana Jones crystal skull. Thank you very much.
I mean, you guys know how much I love dragons. If I could put a dragon in everything, I would. But you can't do that. You can't do that.
It's a shame, though, isn't it?
Rain of Fire, though.
Rain of Fire was.
I'm just saying, as the worst author on the panel here, I challenge this and see my collected work.
I feel that you cannot say that you are the worst one.
I've read most of you.
You're not Charlie.
What is bondage? Everyone who loves Charlie, give a heart. Compliment
That's not what this is. I'm just saying, I have found ways to put dragons in everything because I'm
Charlie, you forgot that there is an author on this panel who cannot distinguish American from British spelling, and that's me. So
you're not alone.
Too.
That's okay. Most Americans can say the same.
Okay.
I prefer writing it because it yells at me.
Yeah. No, I will sometimes throw that U into color or flavor, and
Can I just say there's so much gray?
Oh yeah, gray. Is it an E? Is it an A? For years, I did not know because I read
A for America.
British historical fiction. I did not know.
Okay, what about?
I still swap those.
And I'd be like, oh, okay, I guess either one goes, and you're like.
Do not get me started on my pet peeves between the differences of our English words. Oh my God. As an Aussie, some words trigger me. Oh my God.
Is it the mozzie in the room, Amy?
Actually, that's fine. It's the emu. It's emu, goddammit. Emu, not emu.
Wait, who says emu?
Like every TV show ever that is trying to say emu.
Usually,
like
most people say emu instead of emu.
Yeah, they most down here in the South they say emu.
Yeah, that's the problem.
Rather than
not that.
Yeah,
it's Southerners.
You're talking about the animal, right?
Yeah.
I took an astronomy class. I was in an astronomy class in Texas at East Texas University, and the professor referred to the quotient mu, which is how to measure electromagnetic energy. He said mu every time.
Oh my God.
It was this moo. And I was like, no.
I found
Yeah,
it very
it's the
confusing.
same.
Yeah, lecturers are down here will say moo. And you know what? It was like several classes before I realized that they're saying mew, but they're saying it
It's
with a
mew.
southern accent. And it's like, you need to come with subtitles, y'all.
Yeah.
The only person who can get away with that is Kat Dennings, because every time she says Mew Mew, my heart
Mew
grows 3
Mew.
sizes that day. I'm just saying. She can say moo mew whatever she wants as long as she's in it. I'm fine.
I also think that everyone's allowed like one word that they say absolutely ridiculously.
Mm-hmm.
I have like 30 of those. So.
Yeah.
Be my branding. Like all of my branding is all the words I enjoy mispronouncing.
Champagne.
Good old glass of champagne.
Horses, duvers.
Or lasagna. I love me some lasagna.
Oh yeah, that's good stuff.
Dang quesadillas.
Yep.
Quesadillas.
I will
Yeah.
forgive you all for saying quesadillas wrong, but okay.
It's just a movie quote. That's the only reason I say it that way sometimes.
Quesadillas sounds delicious, but quesadillas, I'm like,
It
what
does
does
not
that
sound.
do?
It sounds
like an animal.
I love tortillas.
Something with like
Sounds like-
multiple
it doesn't
tails.
sound good.
I assume a quesadilla has.
Yeah, it sounds like it's an animal. Oh my god.
Quesadillas. Okay, quesadilla sounds like a mix between a quetzal and an armadillo, and that does not
Yeah,
sound
no,
yummy.
I'm
It
like,
does
I'm
not
expecting
sound
multiple-tailed mythical creature,
That's something you can add in some sci-fi genetics.
right?
Yeah.
We did
In
know
the
some people
fiction
who had
world,
never.
walking around quesadillas.
Ooh,
Yeah.
can we bring that? This is a sidebar, but that slightly gets us back on topic. Can we bring back the mythological creatures, but explain it with sci-fi? I would like that very much.
Ooh.
You mean like dragons are real? This is how science says
Yes,
dragons
but
exist.
also like centaurs, minotaurs,
Unicorns.
All of them.
Ooh.
Nessie
Scientifically
was
accurate
always a dinosaur in Loch Ness and survived. And
Cockatrice.
Yes.
I
Awkward and terrible, but yes.
I have most of them on my farm, but I will not have a basilisk.
I'm not in
Downer,
my
isn't it?
fantasy history how all of these creatures came to be, but I'm like leaving that out. It's just for me in my brain, like how we got centaurs and other creatures that are half human and half animal.
But that's what
I'm
World
leaving it
Anvil
out,
is for.
but it's in here. It's for me. It's written in my notes.
Question: is Medusa's hair just a bunch of basilisks?
It's her eyes. It's her eyes that turn them to stone. Her hair,
Mm-hmm.
the hair is venomous snakes.
Yeah.
So they bite.
But they aren't what.
But
That is like truly the ultimate, don't
if
touch
you
my
look
hair.
in her eyes, that's what kills you.
Yeah, they don't bite
That's
very
why you have
often
to use
because
a
you're
mirror.
turned to stone
You'd
by
have to
them.
be in her proximity, which nobody wants to be in her proximity. So
Speak for
I
yourself.
feel bad for
could-
I mean, I think I feel bad for her too.
I could
I
be a
think
statue
she
in the
was
garden just to
done
be
wrong.
like, they did you
We're
wrong.
done wrong.
Yep,
They did her dirty.
we're all Team Medusa.
Yes, we are all on Team Medusa here. They did her dirty.
Like, don't
Yeah.
turn us into stone. We're rooting for you, girl.
Yep.
I'm just gonna get me some mirror sunglasses and go hang out with my queen.
Yeah.
Okay, like that's how we're gonna do this.
So I guess now's a great time to ask: is everybody about ready for final thoughts?
My worst
You're making us
line I
stop.
ever wrote in a sci-fi.
We
Whatever
want to
you
go
got.
on for days.
We have to
We
stop.
could.
Yeah, it's like the conversation's over. Wait,
Colin probably would like to go to sleep at
I
some
know.
point.
He's like,
Yeah, so would I.
yeah. Oh,
Cullen said, "No, we're good to go."
Yeah, we're fine. Don't forget.
Someone
with
buy me a
Barrett-
coffee and we're good, bro.
With Barrett, I don't normally start at night until 10, 11 o'clock at night. At least they're
Oh,
starting
there we
nice
go.
and early.
yeah. This is like you're talking sci-fi fantasy. I'm surprised this wasn't a 24-hour marathon.
Actually.
Amy, what time is it for you? Ish.
It's 9:30, but I do night shift as a schedule, so I'd be going to bed about now. So it's my bedtime. It's 9:30 in the morning, I should say.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But I stay up all
yeah,
night.
Australia.
Yeah. And then I make it even more confusing with my own schedule. So I mean,
Oh, dear.
No, that's New South Wales, right?
South Australia.
Yeah, no, yeah, South. Okay, okay, South
Yeah.
Australia. Okay.
There's
There's
different
more
times.
than That's why I was
Yeah.
asking.
I'm on Central Standard,
Okay.
or whatever
okay.
daylight savings has made it.
She's on this in the same time zone I want to move to when I retire to Australia, because I want to move to Cocklebiddy.
Where?
Well, here's the reason. The town of Cocklebiddy is just north of the Nutsland Wilderness, and I want to say I live north of Nutsland.
Because why not?
Fair.
Okay, but seriously though, I have family in Australia that I would I've never met them, but I would love to. But I am terrified of Australia at the same time.
You really don't need to be. Especially if you live urban, it's not as much of a problem. I've got lots of spiders because we live out near a national park and things like that. But if you live like more in the urban flat areas where there's lots of houses closer together, you don't get as much wildlife.
So I used to be like, oh, but Australia has kangaroos, and they're like, no, have you seen the kangaroos? They will kill you. They look like
but
boxers.
Even me who lives like a 10-minute drive away from a national park, we barely ever see a kangaroo. And even if you go to the national park, you barely ever see a kangaroo. So it's more so if you like go to the places where the kangaroos live, you're probably going to see one. But otherwise, you don't really have much to do with.
Otherwise, I see what you're saying. I like Australia. Someday I hope to visit. I just asked about like specific time zones, so I can like place myself, because this person, okay, they live in this time zone, so I don't disturb, if I send a message, that kind of thing. But
messages I just get to when I get to them. So
I've
got so many people with
2 hours. I get everything from the last 24 hours. There you go.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. So, I think like, if anybody has any final thoughts they would like to say about any genre or anything, or last things you'd like to impart to others, now might be a good time.
If I can just,
I have one. Right. Since we were talking about the whole genre blending and trying to be everything at once, one of my final thoughts is, it's the same as trying to write for everyone, which means you're writing for no one, because if you try to please everybody all at once, it's just nothing. So if you plan your story, even in the slide, even if you're a pantser, if you revise it afterward, whatever, but if you take care of your story and give it a certain goal for that particular story, instead of just adding all the tropes all at once, it's just it will make it 100 times better, and it will stand out from this whole mass marketing where everything is jumbled up in a hot mess. So just be true to the story that you want to tell at that time. Don't try to please everybody.
Definitely.
I agree with that. I would also say, whatever you do, have a reason for it. And not all books in the series have to be the same genre specifically. They can be in the same world, and you can do different things with it. But as long as you've explained all of the things that you're doing, once the world is built, people will understand.
Definitely. Yeah, like with mine, yes, it's cyberpunk, but in a lot of my books, they've all got different subgenres. Like one is crime fiction, cyberpunk. One is a bit different. And then I've got another one that's more in the survival theme. So it's all set in the same world with the same world built up, but the story can kind of be slightly different depending on what's going on.
I mean, I've got plans to stick in a portal fantasy somewhere in the series, and it's mostly like urban fantasy. So, but I've got like a portal kind of story I'm thinking about down the line. So,
if I could put one wish out for the sci-fi fantasy genres, like if you don't love it, please don't write it. Like, I've seen so many discussions, especially when things get hot, get popular, the right to market, there's enough
Yeah,
stories out
yeah.
there. Don't clutter it up. If this isn't something that you love, and that's true of any of the genres, if you don't love it, why would you put this much time, energy, and effort in? Like, I forgot who said it,
Exactly.
Yeah.
but I forgot who said it, but somebody was like, every book is a relationship that you're gonna have for the rest of your life. Like, do you want that much baggage carried around with you? Like,
Mhm.
if we could
And it
weed
can
out a lot
reflect
of the
in your
people that
writing
aren't.
too.
I with the caution that I understand that sci-fi romance is a subgenre. I understand, but I have a wish as well, and it's please don't try to sell me a sci-fi that it's a romance with a nice, cute space backdrop, because I'm going for the science. So please don't market it to me when I am not your target audience, because I'm just gonna be mad. And it just, I mean, like I said, I understand sci-fi romance is a subgenre. We already had a case of that in AuthorTube. I don't need to mention what that was. But we already had a steampunk space opera madness epic story, whatever. It was just an erotica. Please don't. I don't need to name who, because everybody knows who, and I'm not digging at the person personally, because I don't know the person and I don't care. But don't market it to me, because I am not your target audience. It is just a
Well, I
marketing
think-
mistake.
Yeah,
think
but I
if
think that if it
anything-
is, that's what it is, then just people need to say that it's what it is, and you're not their target audience in that case.
Yeah.
I will read a sci-fi drama or a romance. I do want it to have I prefer for it to have actual sci-fi in it if you're going to do that, because I am expecting that. Otherwise, call it a space opera. That way I know it's just a space, meaning that it's set dressing. To me.
Is the
As long
romance
as I know it is.
necessary for the story to be told?
If it's a romance, then that's what I'm reading. I'm reading a romance that has a set dressing of space or another planet or whatever. And as long as I know that that's what I'm reading, I'm fine with it.
The
If
thing
I
is,
go in
exactly.
I think part of science fiction and part of fantasy fiction right now is science fiction and fantasy settings are just that, settings, and they are setting adventures and horrors and paranormals and romances and mysteries, and all of these other genres are now getting, they couldn't, I hate to say this, but
just say it.
The Fifth Element
Yeah.
was an adventure movie. It was Indiana Jones in space.
Sure.
You could have completely taken out all of the aliens, all of the flying cars, everything, and it would have been a magical fantasy. And I think that's the problem with what is happening with science fiction and fantasy right now. Is there's this level where they're no longer a genre, they're a setting for other genres.
I also posit
Yes.
that if that was a genre in and of itself, none of us would be objecting to it. We would all just say that wasn't for us. But since they're stealing our favorite genres and turning them into that, we are not happy.
Well,
Yeah.
adventure used to be
I would
one of
love,
the primary
I
genres.
would love to have different.
100 years ago, adventure was the genre to write in, and it was considered a genre. Most fiction magazines were adventure ones, and that's where we then got science fiction branched off, and even fantasy branched off from adventure. There were romantic adventure westerns, but they all branched off from adventure as a genre that was very popular even before the 1800s. I mean, like, that is actually where most of the modern genres came from, was out of adventure.
But if you didn't leave your home village where you were born, then where else were you going to get adventure?
Yeah. Look, okay, so I do have a question for anyone who's doing a sci-fi villa. What are you using for your second tag? Because it's sci-fi, and then they're very specifically not anything that would go with sci-fi.
One, you don't have to use the second tag. Two, don't use the LGBTQ tag because a lot of us have started noticing that our stories are getting weird when you do that.
Oh no!
Mm.
Really?
Yeah.
I have
Reading
my
threads.
stuff in Angel
I was
Aliens.
hoping that there was a drama because I've started, that for the sci-fi, but I can choose sci-fi, and the next closest thing is romance, but I'm not. Romance is such an aside that I almost feel guilty for putting that. And I know that I can do the tags. So I plan
If
on
you can
doing
justify adventure, do adventure. It's one of the most popular genres on the platform.
Yeah,
right now.
Okay, I can justify adventure because it's mostly they're all on an adventure. It's sci-fi, but there are relationships, and there will be some romance because there are relationships as they're on this adventure.
Mhm.
All right, I like that. Thank you, Charlie.
So to Justin in the chat, if you market it that way, like Justin mentioned that they wrote a sci-fi erotica something. I just saw the comment pass by. Sorry, I didn't catch all the words. And what do you say about that? Well, I mean, I'm not talking about your case. If you market it that way, great. I'm not gonna read it because I don't do erotica. I just don't care. But if you market it that way and you're honest about it, awesome. There is an audience for that. What I was talking about was like that particular case of a whole jumble of years marketing as space opera, science fiction, blah blah blah, marketing, and then when the time comes for the novel to launch, ooh, suddenly a lot of sex, and I'm like, oh, okay, I'm out of here, bye.
Yeah, because the marketing's really where a lot of this goes wrong. It's like when I lost faith in the new Dune movie completely is when I saw the new Star Wars trailer.
Mm-hmm.
Don't get me started on the new Star Wars movies. We'll be here for another couple hours.
Oh, dear.
I mean, it predates it, but that's fine. And it's not like it at all, but that's fine.
And now we've come full circle back to science fiction and fantasy being diluted for the mass media.
Yeah.
Well, here we are.
Yeah.
This is the rant that never
I'll just
ends.
I'll just stick with with some of my favorite sci-fi books. I'm just gonna stick with Kazuo Ishiguro novels and Andy Weir. If he gets another movie, I don't give a damn. I mean, I enjoy that kind of sci-fi. It is a sci-fi that really makes me think in different ways because Andy Weir is just like being a nerd and throwing all the sciencey stuff at my face, and Ishiguro is like not throwing any details at my face, and I still have to think to puzzle it all together. It's awesome. But both extremes of sci-fi make me think, and that's the kind of thing that I enjoy. So that's the kind of literature that I don't watch movies, so I don't give a damn. But this is what I'm going to stick with. These are the books that I'm going to, and the authors and all the people who write that kind of stuff who exist. And I'm going to stick around and I'm going to see what they do next. If it ends in Netflix, great. I don't care. I just read the books. That's what matters to me.
So I think this made me what you mentioned.
I don't know. I mean,
think of a book that you might like. It has one part that is sex, but it's not like erotica. It is just part of the story. But that's Annihilation by Jeff Vandermeer. You may enjoy it. It's also very weird. I actually reviewed this on my Goodreads. I liked it and disliked it for the same reason, which was because when I finished it, I had a lot of questions and it made me think really hard. And I'm still thinking about it and I'm not okay. But I will also be reading the next book in the series. So.
And now you're making me want to read it, and I'm going to sit back and enjoy my torture and my tears.
Yes, do it. Do it. You will read it, and you will be like, you have told me nothing, and I loved it.
I'm setting myself up for this, but I'm going to definitely put that on my TBR because I must know.
This is how I'm going to hurt your feelings.
Thank you. When we're on the next one, I'm like, Sandra, I'm talking to you.
Why did you do that to me?
Colin, do you have final thoughts you'd like to share with us before we wrap up for the day?
Not particularly, no.
I'm just
I think
trying to. You've been
really
so lovely and yet
most
quiet.
most of the pertinent remarks have already been made by all these wonderful people. So I'll just sit here and say, yeah, it's time to stop watering it down.
Mm-hmm.
So, Colin, what is your one pet peeve about people who do steampunk or gaslight that they include?
Basically, they give no thought to the genre or subgenre. I'm not getting into that argument. They give no thought to that. They do exactly what you've just said they do with science fiction and fantasy. They think, oh, steampunk, I know. Everyone can wear goggles and top hats. And one of them can have a metal arm. And then they can go off and fight dragons in outer space. So, yeah, there is no thought to actually any of the science, the mechanics, or society. And also, a lot of steampunk doesn't address the darker side of the Victorian age and all the bad things. And I want to make it quite clear the fact that they all existed and how it affected people. Otherwise, what's the point? You're not making a comment. So, yeah, that'd be my one thing.
Excellent.
I like ancient aliens in contemporary fiction, so.
Yeah.
The only thing that I really feel like I haven't heard much in 3+ hours of our wonderful Good Time Circus is I know from enough experience as a librarian, as a public librarian, for fantasy readers, it is good for you as a writer in that readers will opt into what you're writing. They'll pick up your book or they opt in to somehow in the blurb or the picture or both mention the cool animals that will definitely be showing up. If
they better be there.
You got to put a dragon. You got to mention it, or you got to show a dragon somewhere on the outside of the book. This is very.
And
important.
if it's on the cover and it's not in the book, I'm gonna be mad.
Oh yeah, no, they'll crucify you, and you will deserve every last bit of it. And I will not comfort you.
I will be there with the pitchfork.
But you know, if you got unicorns,
dragon in the book.
Slap that unicorn on the cover. Be sure to mention it in the blurb. Be sure to mention all the cool animals because fantasy readers definitely want to. They have certain animals they're into, and as long as you include those fantastical animals, they will read everything you write, even if they also think it's crap. They will then buy the next book, even though, but still they have my favorite animal. Nobody writes about griffins. And it's like, okay, fine. You do you. So I would say, like, if you are writing in the fantasy genre and you are going to use fantastical animals, be sure to play that up. Do not hide your animals under caves, bushes. Don't hide your fantastical animals because fantasy readers are definitely into it. If you are writing science fiction, be sure to the tropes, the sci-fi tropes, you know, if we're talking about warp drives or we talk about spaceships, if there's a spaceship in your story, there better be a spaceship on your cover or at least mention the spaceship on the blurb because science fiction readers are definitely also into their tropes, their vehicles, their technology. You got a transporter, be sure to mention the transporter or somehow show something that looks like a transporter. This is important to readers. Make it easy so they can adore you. They will adore you. Are you ready to be a minor god? Because when you write sci-fi and fantasy genres, when you sell it right, which is honest but good, you become minor gods to these readers. And so be prepared. That is my final thoughts on that I haven't heard anybody say yet.
You inspired me, Glory. I have finished the book that is the spoof of all of the problems we have with sci-fi fantasy. And it is that everyone gets towed off into space as Earth implodes on a spaceship that is powered by dragons. And it's secretly Noah's Ark, which is why all the creatures are in the spaceship. I rest my case.
We need to write this book.
I am ready for it.
Yeah. We should all just write a segment, like a chapter each, and see what happens.
We can write it like World War Z. Everybody writes their own chapterette of what they're living through.
That would be so good, though.
Yes.
We might have to put some limits on there, otherwise it might go a bit.
After Glory's
Like
comment,
everybody looked at me when you said that.
After Glory's comment, I'm basically getting the vibe that I have to change my sci-fi covers. Okay.
Yes. You need to let your readers know from the start.
Who else is training one of the space dragons? I am.
I want one. It's got to be green. I want a green one.
My
dragons.
space dragons aren't real dragons. They're called Quetzals, and they're actually feathered serpent that are hexapods.
Can I take
You get a dragon. You get a dragon.
Yeah.
You get a dragon.
Can I
belch fire?
We'll
They
be in a
do.
chapter called How to Train Your Space
They
Dragon.
belch a gas that
no.
hits air and turns into fire.
Yes.
Mine's just
They're
going to
dragon adjacent.
Yeah.
Can I also have a hot alien boyfriend? I'm cool with that.
Ooh, good times.
With the special,
alien.
you want the one with the special implants and upgrades?
Yeah, sure. Throw that in there.
All the body mod.
All the
Yes.
mods.
All of it. Yeah. Oh god. I play way too much Mass Effect.
I need this book now. I'm just saying.
Can I get a partially blind cyborg boy? I would who's an engineer who can do whatever.
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
He knows how to do all the maintenance.
Is his name PC3PO?
Yeah.
We have to put it back where Disney doesn't sue us, though. We gotta.
Oh my god.
Right,
Yes.
So
I'm done. I swear I'm
Head
done.
in us, Colin. Join us. Join us on the dark side.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh dear.
So that does lead me to now that everybody's getting their space dragons. Would anyone like to do an intro? They are fully optional. You don't have to do it.
I've done
Everybody can
enough.
throw it down below. But I'm throwing it out there.
I'm good.
If you don't want it, let me know in the private chat. Otherwise, I will do round robin. Anybody? No, we're all good. Then guess what? Guess who's up? There's shit going around.
Check out my new Vela series. Check out both my Vela series if you want some what will probably be a love pentagram, because I really think they're all going to end up together by the end of it. Like, regardless of what I decide, I Blinded Angels, it's up, it's fun, it's over there. The Shadow Phoenix Saga also over on Vela, and I feel extremely called out by a lot of the comments because it will have everything. It will have your magic furries. It will have your tugwaddles. It will have your murder radishes. And there are dragons and like owls that forgot how to fly and all kinds of weird stuff in it. So just enjoy. It's fine. Oh, and the world ends at chapter 13. Spoilers.
What?
Okay. Are you good, Charlie? Or do
I'm
you have
good.
more
I feel like it's
outro?
important to like just put that expectation out there. Like that's how it's happy, it's adventure, it's fun. Oh wait, what? The world ended? Yes. Welcome to the rest of the
Yeah,
series.
come along for the ride.
Come along
Okay.
for the ride. It's gonna be great.
Not your world, but a world. Sure. Yeah.
Some world out there.
Laura?
Hello, my name is Laura Nettles. I write sci-fi and horror, and yeah, I am going to be hopefully finishing my draft of my middle grade horror this coming month. And yeah, I do vlogs. Come follow along.
Thank you. Amy.
Hello, I'm Amy, also Shiny Knight on Twitch. And I'm currently writing my cyberpunk novel. No, there are no space dragons in it. Sorry to disappoint. It is a space opera though, so watch out for spaceships in that. But yes, come follow me on my Instagram as well, because I'm looking to actually announce the character names with mood boards. So plans, yes.
What's your Instagram handle?
It's on my Twitch. So if you go find my Twitch, it's probably in one of the links that Glory's popped up. So
It is.
yeah.
Yeah.
And hi, I am Nia, the Vixen of Fiction here on YouTube. You can also find me under Vixen of Fiction on Twitch and the Vixen of Fiction on Instagram. I am the writer of sci-fi, historical fiction, and fantasy, and I like to mix in a little bit of romance and supernatural in those genres. I am currently working on a fantasy that's going to be my nano project, actually, and I'm working on a comic and a Vela. It's a sci-fi. I'm having a lot of fun with it. Way too much fun with it. I do way too much world building, but it's what I do. If you would like to follow me, I'm planning on in December offering bits and pieces of the comic through my Ko-fi before the whole thing comes out all together. So if you'd like to get a little teasers of what that's going to be starting in December, you can follow me on Ko-fi and you'll get little bits of it there. And other than that, you can catch me here a lot with Glory. If I'm not on screen, I'm in the chat on Mondays.
Oh,
Sometimes I forget that I'm not on screen and I'll be just like listening to them and I'll comment and I'm like, oh, I'm not on screen. I've actually got to type my comment in because I'm so used to talking to them. It's sad. I know.
You're not alone in this.
I knew I couldn't be the only one. I'm like jumping in the conversation like, oh, wait, let me type that.
I definitely log on to watch and wave at the screen when everyone waves, and then realize
I
that
do
no
too.
one can see me.
Hold on, they can't see me. Okay. Doll.
Thank you so much for inviting me today. And I am Dulce Silverno. I'm a blind storyteller for introspective readers. I write mostly sci-fi, but I like to explore other genres with my short
Doll, I think you might. Are you breaking up or
stories.
am I breaking
And
up?
tell me,
Doll, can you repeat that? You're breaking up, darling.
Doll, you there, babe?
am I getting evil fi?
Yeah, the gremlins have gotten you, honey.
Oh God. Okay. Well, hang on. Is it better now?
Mhm.
It sounds better now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm just gonna go back a little bit. I write sci-fi. I add a strong psychic abilities, paranormal phenomena to almost everything I write. I also write about blind and visually impaired characters in whatever genre that comes to my mind. If you want to check out the first 2 chapters of my sci-fi that's still a work in progress, you can join me on Patreon. If someone teaches me how to do that on Ko-fi, then I will also put those 2 chapters on Ko-fi. But I don't know how to do that yet. So at the moment it's only on Patreon if you want to check that out. At the end of the month, I will be releasing another short story. Again, if I know how to do it on Ko-fi, then I'll do it on Ko-fi as well, but mostly it's going to be just Patreon. I have some works available if you want to listen to my short stories, or if you want to support me on Amazon, I have one for sale. So I have things out that you can read or whatever. Thank you so much for inviting me. I don't know what else to say. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Doll.
Eva has added a lot of Bell's links in
Yes.
the comments as well.
Hi, I'm Carrie. I'm a fantasy writer and a mom, and sometimes I do streaming on Twitch, or I am on with some of these lovely people throughout the week. I have a nonfiction project currently on Vela, and my fantasy book, one of my fantasy series, is with beta readers right now. And I'm hoping maybe late spring, early summer to start releasing that on Vela as well. So we'll see.
Excellent. Thank you. Maggie?
Hello, I'm Mama Maggie Ward, stroke survivor and farm mom from Colorado. This is my lovely crew that I enjoy hanging out with many, many times a week. I have books on Amazon for Kindle, Ink It for free, and I have 60 episodes on Kindle Vella in one book, and the second book just started today. So I'm kind of all over the place. I am very passionately in love with the sci-fi genre, and I was happy to be here today.
Aw, thank you. Thank you so much, Maggie. Colin?
Ah, it's me, he says, waking up suddenly. Yeah, Colin Clark here. I write urban fantasy, horror, steampunk, and anything else I fancy. You can find me on AuthorTube at the Writer's Files. Just a quick heads up, I've got the next episode of my writing steampunk series on world building out, and that goes live at 4 p.m. UK time tomorrow. And you can also find some examples of my work on my website. The link, I hope, is down below. And I've had a blast this evening. It's been wonderful hanging out with these wonderful writers and pretending I belong. It's fabulous. Right, that's it from me.
Thank you, Colin. Chandra?
Hi everyone, my name is Chandra Arthur. You can find me on YouTube under the same name or on all other social media at cchanwrite. I have all of my stream information on Twitch and on YouTube, but I will also be releasing some writing. I have some short stories coming out on Ko-fi, as well as I will be releasing the first few chapters of some of my works in progress. So if you're interested in reading some of my writing, you can just head on over there and they will be coming out very soon.
Oh, thank you. All right. Well, here we are. If you've made it this far, applause to you. I'm impressed. We're so glad you're still here, and we hope you've had a wonderful time hanging out with us today. And let me point to the right way. All of these amazing, talented, lovely, fantastic people, they are both genuinely lovely people as human beings and also as incredibly talented writers. I consider it a delight to be able to visit in being inside their brain by reading all of their writings. At least all the samples I've gotten have been superb. It is one of the criteria to be on here. So if you see them, then you know that at least I'm a fan. We hope that you will come back next week. We are doing horror. We're going to visit the genre of horror. Yes, it's going to be exciting. Thrills, chills. We are including in that suspense and thrillers and all of those things because, you like to
nightmare
that
stories.
makes you want to lock the door and get under the covers so the monsters can't get you. Definitely A-okay in my book. So we're going to talk about this as a genre. It is a fantastic genre. It is a very old genre, in fact. And when we talk about the genre as a modern genre, we, of course, have to talk about Mary Shelley, which, as a feminist, I'm a fan of. So I really hope you'll be able to come next week. And if you can't view us live, please consider watching us on the replay. We are always here for you here at YouTube. So thank you so much for coming. Everybody's links are down below. I'll be adding Carrie soon. And thank you so much. We are going to say goodbye, but it won't be forever. So long, folks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
See ya.